So my name is Sarah, and together with my colleague Lieke, who was here, I'll guide you through our event today. So let me show you a little bit what our program is. So first, I'll kick off with a presentation about Future Media Apps, who are hosting the event here today. Then we continue with an introduction by KIKK, and afterwards our moderator Stan Christian Selvier will have a discussion on different ecosystems, all the challenges and opportunities in there. Then we will have FIT introducing some two startups. That will be Twipe and Femfeel. And then afterwards we have Sophie and Boege, who will explain us a bit more on how to enter the metaverse safely. This will be followed by a second discussion moderated by Anssi Kolumainen, who will talk about data and platforms and who's in control. And first there was another part of startups introduced by Peter with Stadium, and that will be Lesido and SUMM AI. And then the discussion on data and platforms. So before I continue, I would like to thank our sponsors and most importantly, Flanders Investment and Trade and the Walloon Agency of Investment. So Future Media Apps, why are we here today? I'll start with kicking off with a small video that explains a little bit who we are and what we do.
Hi, we are Future Media Hubs. Now, what does that exactly mean? We're an initiative by VRT in close collaboration with RTBF. We created a vibrant network of media organizations, commercial and public, all over Europe. We innovate by sharing knowledge and collaborating. Because in this ever-growing industry, working together is key. Get inspired and future-proof yourself in this competitive environment. Collaborating is even good for your wallet. How do we do this? We organize monthly meetings with our different hubs. And we also organize inspiring events. Our hubs, we have 4 of them, each with their own main subject: next generation, startups, new tech, and gaming. Do you want to be a part of the future? Join us. We are Future Media Hubs.
So that's us. Thank you. I'll go through it very quickly because we have a super interesting program following up from there. So, like the video already said, we are a community of public and commercial media organizations, so both broadcasting and publishing, and we exchange on innovation and we set up collaborations, different projects, and I'll give some examples today. So we have these 4 hubs, we have 4 teams, like that has been said already. So there's one on new tech, younger audiences, gaming, and then startups and scale-ups. So the first one is our Sandbox Hub. This is where we, as media organizations, try to inspire each other and tell each other how you can best work together with startups. What is a good framework around it? What works well, what doesn't? Who are the interesting startups, in our case, within Europe? Who has a project done with one of these startups? How did that go? And so on. So basically, you see there, we try to keep track of all of the startups that come through our hubs. And then we know who worked with them, what the lessons are, and then we try to help them scale, and that's on this side. I don't know if you see it very well, but in pink, this is where the startup was initiated from, and then the green colors, this is where we try to help them scale within the other countries, which is going pretty good. I will not tell you more because we have 4 interesting startups from the hubs talking later, so you'll be able to hear that. But our second hub is on new technology. So basically, what we do here is talk about AI, 5G, NDI, the newest cameras, only techie stuff. So just one example of our Belgian colleagues from DPG. These are, they did a project which is called Automated News Studio, and basically a journalist with one button on, pushing on one button can completely live automate his news episode, if I can say it like that, which allows them to have only one person and not the technical crowd present. By the way, this works technically, but it's still difficult because not all the journalists want to be there on their own. They don't feel really secure without a technical support. So, our younger audiences group. So this is where we talk about yeah, everything related to younger audiences. Who are they? Where are they? Where are they? How can we interact with them? And so on. For example, here NRK, who has a case on positive journalism, or BBC, who are working on adaptive podcasting. So basically, if you go somewhere, based on where you are, what you're doing, you get a different podcasting. So these are just topics we discuss in our hubs, and then people just tell what they're working on, what works good, what doesn't. People interact, can work around it as well, and so on. And then the last one is our game hub. This is where we talk about the different platforms, the different games. Where do we as media organizations need to be? And how can we get involved with that growing crowd? An example here is NRK, who have bought a house, you can see there, and they put a lot of influencers in there, and they are streamed live on Twitch. So they can choose whatever they do. They game or they do other stuff. They cook, and then people can just follow it. Another thing we talk about is, for example, France Télévisions. They have built or given their audience like VR glasses, and when they put them on, they have a replica of, for example, Roland Garros. They go in it and they can experience the stadium and do a lot of interesting stuff there. So again, with this case, we as other media organizations learn from them and what worked well and what didn't. So that was really fast who we are. Make sure you follow us, our newsletter, our LinkedIn. If you have any questions, please come to Liken and myself. Happy to talk to you later on. And now I would like to give the word to Laura Latour, who will tell us a bit more on KIKK. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So I am Laura Latour. I am the director of KIKK Festival in Belgium, in Wallonia, in the French part of Belgium. So I am here to talk to you about the KIKK Galaxy. So we work at the crossroad between art, sciences, technologies, and society. As you can see, we have a lot of projects, but everything was born in 2011 with the KIKK Festival. So today we are organizing the 12th edition of the festival, an international festival with a lot of conferences. We invite 50 speakers from all over the world to talk about design, web design, artificial intelligence, creative coding, and some stuff. As you can see, we organize also a lot of workshops and masterclasses for kids and for professionals too. We build a big village on the main place of Namur in Wallonia, in which you can find 3 parts. First one is KIKK Pro. It's the B2B area for the festival where you can organize your meetings. We have an app to help you to find the right people on the festival. You may find also international booths. So we invite some countries to come with their creative ecosystem to connect their companies to all the professionals on the festival. Last year, we will have a booth from Quebec, Wallonia, and France. And in this village, you can also find a KIKK market. So it's a big place for innovative projects. We invite 40 speakers, 40 innovative people from all over the world to show their project and to organize some sales and pre-sales. As you can see, we have different projects in music tech, health tech, and a lot of stuff. We have a lot of networking activities and a lot of parties too, as you can see. And last but not least, KIKK takes place in the entire city. So we have a lot of digital art installation for families, kids, professionals. In church, we invest the churches, the schools, the cultural places with a lot of installation. KIKK is, last year it was 2,500 professionals, 25,000 visitors, 41 nationalities during 4 days. I have a little video because I think it's important to... I hope that we will have the chance to see you this year from 26 to 29 October. But KIKK organization is not just a festival, it's also a place. So 4 years later, in 2014, we wanted to create a place dedicated to creative industries. So we created with the Economic Office of Namur and the University of Namur a place called TRAC, a creative hub, Fab Lab, Media Lab, in which we, KIKK, manage the Fab Lab, the Media Lab, and a big part of the program of the activities. So we have a lot of inspiring activities and networking activities in this place. But KIKK is not just a festival, a place, it's also a platform of production and co-production of digital art installation. And we organize a lot of residencies with international and national partners. Yeah. And finally, we have our own exhibition place called Le Pavillon. So it's a place dedicated to digital culture. We explore the digital culture by exhibition with everybody in this place. So at the top of the citadel of Namur. Yeah, as you can see, that's some exhibition for families, kids, professionals, partners. Yeah. So finally, I can say that KIKK explores the impact of technologies on the society with a lot of events, with a lot of exhibition and with workshops. Thanks. And if you have some questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you.
So thank you, Laura. And now I'm super excited to introduce to you our moderator, which is Stan Christian Salver. Stan is an Academy Award nominated content and tech entrepreneur who is working on media innovation and policy strategies. And Stan, I will let you introduce your wonderful panel.
Cool. Good morning. Good morning. Great. Finally, I have your attention. The cold is definitely helping as well. Okay, before we start, well, our panelists, please. Sander and Ivan, where? Yeah, there he is. Quick quiz. Who's from Europe? Who's not from Europe? Who's from Asia? Ha. Okay. Great. So I guess the audience is about 50-50, which is great, and I think that's exactly the kind of the idea of the opening session. So what we're trying to do here in the opening session, talk very fast because we only have 45 minutes, and we have a lot of things to cover. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about ChatGPT, because obviously, and regenerative AI, because you're going to get a lot of that everywhere else. But we're going to talk about a few important things. I think we have to talk about state of the world, specifically as in many ways the US and European ecosystems are different, but there are definitely opportunities on, I'd say, both sides of Atlantic. Well, hey, we have to talk about platforms because they're growing really fast. We have to talk about deregulate, who's going to pay for it. We're going to talk about UGC, which is a bad word, but for the sake of a better alternative for right now, I think we have to explore these exciting things around creators and what creators can bring or already bringing. And then obviously we have to talk about disinformation and misinformation. And basically what's more important is your informed audience is more important or your shareholders, as the latest Fox thing has very clearly demonstrated us. But without further ado, a quick intro to our extraordinary panelists. I also have to say that the whole idea here wasn't to a man's panel, because it's totally 80s. Well, we are not talking about diversity, right? In the media industry, pun intended. But we had Annelies Jansen, who's extraordinary. She has a long track both in running big media corporations in Europe and in the US. Unfortunately, due to a very tragic occurrence with a family, she's unable to attend us today. But she'll definitely be here next year. Well, without further ado, Ivan Shapiro, I guess doesn't need too long of an introduction. Media cartographer, Emmy Peabody-winning TV, film, and podcast producer. Also does extraordinary newsletter on Substack on the state of the media ecosystem. Sander Saar, shortly Disney, Moonbug, AOL Maker Studios, somebody who eats platforms and content for lunch, breakfast, and dinner. And recently also does strategy for Red Bull Media House and has built a lot of really extraordinary IP. He's the man to go when you want to know what's happening around platforms and creators. And finally, Johan Oomen. Johan comes from the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision. If I might a little bit exaggerate, NISV is this extraordinary digital vacuum cleaner that kind of ingests a lot of different types of media, in digital media in all kinds of forms, does great work on research, archiving, disinformation, misinformation, and those types of things, including media democracy as well. So yeah, hey, let's get going. So state of the world. You published at the end of last year 2 really extraordinary media cartographies, right? One for US, for Europe. My short takeaway was that US has platforms, Europe has nothing. So what's your kind of take on the ecosystems?
I think, I don't think Europe doesn't have platforms. I think that the platforms have not yet been built out of the extraordinary broadcasters that are across Europe. Here in the US, because everything is economically driven by profit and shareholder value, all of the major broadcasters had to reshape their businesses before they were prepared to do so. So right now, an analogy I like to make is they're redesigning a bathroom inside a house that's on fire, right? So they had an economic model built around being paid for their content and running ads in it, and then that disintegrated, and now they're trying to rebuild it exactly as it was, but on digital. In the case of Europe, you don't have as many platforms because your broadcasters...
Spotify.
Well, you do have Spotify. I brought that up. And a couple of others, but your big IP generators have the benefit of migrating more slowly because their business model doesn't require them to compete directly with Netflix, compete directly with Prime, to compete directly with Apple. So I think, honestly, what I've noticed or what I've noted is that if you look at, I think the classic example or the best example I can find right now is BBC coming out at the end of last year or the beginning of this year and saying, by the end of this decade, we're going to be a single app, pure digital play. And we're going to do away with some of our brands and slim it all down to this one product. I don't think that they know exactly how that's going to happen, but they're pointing somewhere on the horizon. You don't see commercial entities in the United States saying, we're shutting down the broadcast center on this date certain. And so I think the purely capitalistic nature of the American media ecosystem made it make a lot of mistakes in a hurry to do something they weren't prepared to do, where accidentally or by design because of the way that your economies work, you have, I think, more time to build your own platforms. The local platforms in Europe are going to be more important to the communities that they serve than Netflix is. Netflix will be there and they'll get viewership. So will Prime, so will Apple, so will Disney. But your local publishers will ultimately hold more sway, I think, in the territories that they're at, they're in, and they're going to have more time to migrate than ABC, CBS, and NBC did here. And hopefully they'll be able to avoid a lot of the mistakes that we made here. Does that make sense? Okay.
It's hopeful. Well, look,
People
what's your
are
kind
asleep
of
mostly.
Yeah, cool. What's your kind of key takeaways, like your key temperature points for the US ecosystem as now and the European ecosystem? There were quite interesting findings on both in terms of demographics, who the consumer are, who's going to pay for it, and etc. Very kind of short punches.
What's interesting is Europe is older than the rest of the world, demographically speaking. So that has slowed the digital migration to a certain extent in Europe. In the United States, we created this bundle that everybody found efficient and it was fine. I watched ads and I paid for content. This is television primarily. And it's being replaced. It was replaced by chaos. It's free over here. It's paid over here. I have to go from one walled garden to the next walled garden. And I did a survey of about 20,000 consumers earlier this year. And what we found is the answer in the consumer who has been given all this power on when to watch and how to watch and what to watch whenever they want, now wants ultimate control over how to pay for it as well. And they're going to move their pay preferences around depending on the time of month and the program and the channel. Sometimes I'll pay, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I want ads, I'll suffer through ads, and sometimes I won't. And what we really found was across music, sports, news, television, all the paid products, we asked them, what are your plans with the suite of things you're subscribing to right now. Only 7% said, I'm going to keep what I have.
Yeah, and by the way, I did a little bit of math as well. An average subscription for U.S. households, well, according to some statistics, $273. Europe is around, mid hundreds.
Right, and so Netflix is going to suffer through churn, the way that the public broadcaster just won't, because you first of all, there's the public service part of it. We were just discussing this earlier, and then secondarily, there is a utility that has been wound inside the lives of the constituents that they serve that I don't think Amazon serves it, but not necessarily through their programming, through their free shipping. I think other services will also provide it, but that's where, again, I think, yes, America has platforms, but I don't know that America's platforms are the envy that everybody seems to think that they are. They're a pain in the ass to run. They always have to be fed, whereas the model that you have, at least to start your base from, is a little bit more secure because the customer base is always there.
Sander, what's your take? You're very closely associated with platforms. You work with platforms, and you've said that platforms are the best thing ever.
Well, first of all, I think that your question started with differentiation between US and European ecosystems.
How does that look from the IP and creator space?
And I think there is no separation. And it's hard to get your head around it, but there isn't. Because a thing called the internet happened, which really broke down the borders around the world, with the exception of mostly one country. But that has really completely changed the way we create content, the way we distribute content, the way we consume content radically. So the way we create content, like for every TV executive, there was now out there thousands of TikTok creators. From distribution point of view, Netflix, which is some of the highest feeders in the system, it needs more content. They produce around 6.5 hours of content every day. On YouTube, there's 500 hours uploaded every minute. So that's the biggest platform out there in streaming space compared to somebody like YouTube. And also on consumption side, we have now fully algorithmic consumption because of the internet. So we're not just dependent on whatever is available in my region to my consumers. We're not just competing with all other countries. We're also competing with everybody else who's creating content. And that's why people are drawn to places like TikTok and YouTube, because it's so much more personalized. Just for them, just for their preferences, and because they can offer that product because they get so much more signal. Somebody spends an average 2 videos a session on Netflix. They watch 27 on TikTok. There's so much more input they get from it. When somebody stops on a video, comments, tags, hashtags, collabs, etc. like this, it's so much more refined to you, and you feel like this is my TV. And those platforms, therefore, are in a completely different scale. So some of the biggest platforms you think about, Netflix and Disney, are in 200 million. Like, that's a big platform. But add another order of magnitude. There's 2 billion plus people on YouTube. Not to talk about many of the other competitors they have. That has completely changed the landscape.
We're going to get into this infrastructure thing later.
That has led to a place where actually somebody like Netflix is doing more for the European culture than maybe even European platforms themselves. Like, take some of the big shows like Lupin from France that reached 70 million households in a month. That was #1 show in 8 or 7 of the biggest European countries. Or Barbarians followed right after that. Again, #1 show in 17 markets that was dubbed even before it came out. So arguably, Netflix does even more for bringing European values and culture together and gives us the common things to talk about than even our own local platform. So while I, to a certain degree, agree that local producers are very relevant and important, just even with these 2 examples, I believe that the global distribution is even more important.
Johan, data. I think it's been quite interesting thing that there's been those, I would say, historic misconceptions that US is very data driven and Europe is very let's say policy or ideology driven, but there's quite big interesting things happening around data as well that kind of brings in a big approach that can benefit anybody in the ecosystem, and it has also good financing attached too.
Yes, absolutely. So So Europe, being consisting of 27 member states, there's big investment in creating a digital single market. So basically allowing goods and services to travel throughout the union. And the von der Leyen Commission launched a couple of years ago a strategy for data that basically looks at how we can put in place infrastructures, regulations, etc., to make sure that that data can travel frictionless. And one specific part of this strategy is the creation of data spaces. This is something that is now underway. One data space in particular, I think it's interesting in this panel, is the data space for media. And basically this is collaboration between both public service media and commercial companies in Europe, and trying to make sure that programming and related data can travel throughout the union. So this is quite new, but there's a big political push to make this a success.
Yeah. So for non-Europeans, the project is also called Gaia. And what it does is that if you have different corporations coming together and say, hey, we're kind of thinking that here's a business model, then let's figure out a standard how we can talk to each other, and let's kind of create a mega DMP or data management platform that everyone can benefit from. And then whilst you're doing it, there's good money available for running those pilots. And
and just to add to that, so the data space for media is just one of a number of data spaces. So the ambition is broader than media. So there's also a data space for cultural heritage, data space for tourism, for research. So eventually, if this is a success, then there will be ways to exchange data without being dependent on big tech platforms. That's like the end goal of what the Commission is looking for.
Interesting. Well, that's quite a good cue for our platform topic. Well, as Sander said, Activate Consult's report from the last year's report, Outlook for 2023, put that by 26, YouTube will have 2.4 billion users, TikTok close to 2 billion, etc. That's 1/3 of the world, right? Where's exactly the competition right now? Both for Sander and even YouTube as the new infrastructure.
I think...
and the really changing TV and audiovisual content landscape.
Yeah, so I think
globally.
I think you have to, when you talk about YouTube as infrastructure, you have to look at Google writ large as infrastructure. Who here bought a connected television for a room that they never thought they would have a television in during COVID? Raise your hand. Nobody? In the US, a lot of us did that. We put TVs in rooms we didn't have TVs in. We put them on our back porch. We put them by the barbecue. And so there was this great acceleration of adoption of connected television, faster than it would.
Sorry, we only had Zoom calls.
Yeah, apparently. Well, we have more space. But the fastest growing connected television platform in the world is Google TV. They are the brains inside Sony more often. They're the brains inside TCL more often. So they want to replicate the duopoly that they have on phones. They control 70% of the world's phones. And YouTube is going to be probably the most watched channel on most connected televisions. You can talk about Netflix, you can talk about these other platforms, but YouTube is responsible for more streaming on a daily basis than Netflix or anybody else. And so when you connect the Google infrastructure, operating television sets and phones to YouTube, I think Alphabet is going to wind up being a major de facto platform and infrastructure provider for most of video entertainment on Earth.
Sander, scalable. Is there a scalable business model for like big businesses and not just only creators?
I think we've seen all of that already,
and you have to talk about Moonbug as well.
And even like the way that the question is posed, like, is there a viable business model to businesses and creators? Like, they're two separate things. The biggest IP out there today is built by creators. Whether we want to look into that truth or not, like, this is it. This is the moment. And if you talk to anybody who's younger than this room, you'll realize very quickly that most of what we call the traditional world, or traditional talent, is almost irrelevant for them. And somebody like, for example, Mr. Beast, who's built...
Who knows Mr. Beast?
More Mr. Beast fans than connected TV fans.
Look at that.
Great stuff.
But definitely, like, he's built an empire around him, starting with YouTube, where he commanded more than 100 million subscribers. With his other language channels, he's at 200 million subscribers. He's driving 1.5 billion views every month, out of which a third is coming from international dubbed language content. So he is probably one of the most international creators. He just happens to be based in the US, but he views those platforms as global opportunities. From that, he's launched his burger joint business in thousands of locations. He's also now selling his own chocolate brand called Feastables. He's on a top shelf of every Walmart around the country because he brings people to the store and he moves products because he's built something that people deeply care about. So I would call that real business. Yeah, but he's also a creator. And a lot of those biggest IP is built by the creators.
I think that 50% of revenues generated from intellectual property will come from the creator economy, as we look forward. Mr. Beast is a good example, but Roblox is powered by creators. So there is this massive move, and I don't think people truly understand how much revenue is already generated in the creator economy.
I'm going to interrupt you here for a second. Sander, Moonbug. A few days ago, there was the Variety annual intelligence panel. And I think, they put out the biggest merger and acquisitions for IP. I think number 2 or 3 was Cocomelon, right? What's Cocomelon and what's Moonbug and how you actually made that kind of platform opportunity work in that context for the funds?
For sure. How many of you know about Cocomelon or Little Baby Bum? Those people with kids, I think, raise their hands because there's no other way. Moonbug is one of the largest creators of kids content out there, driving about 8 billion with a B views every month. And more than several 100 million subscribers every month.
And it's a European company.
No longer, yeah. But it
was a European company.
Yes. Moonbug started with building audiences where audiences are and building the IP on YouTube as a core home for it, but then extending it to all other places. So obviously original content that you can see on Netflix. Cocomelon is the longest standing top 10 show on Netflix of anything else that they produced. It's number 1, not just in kids, but across the board. It's also one of the biggest music labels on Spotify for kids. And those are the things that you don't really think about. And it's built a very strong franchise around them, whether it's games or toys or any other product that's in the space. So it is, again, one of the biggest IPs in the kid space that is really built on top of global platforms.
And the model basically was that you were looking into online IP, scaling it online, and then putting it back into real world in terms of the old world products, merchandise, ancillary.
Yes.
Yeah. So totally digital first approach in the professional ecosystem.
And you built this outside the gatekeeper economy. You went direct to consumer on YouTube first. Then eventually you sold content to Netflix and other folks. But yeah, I think that is the way a lot of these, especially content businesses, are going to be built on a moving forward basis. Someone asked yesterday.
Already today.
Yeah, right. But I think there are a lot of traditional creators of content who don't understand how to make that leap to direct to consumer. Someone asked me yesterday, if you had IP that you were looking to sell, who would you sell it to? And my answer was direct to the consumer, because ultimately you have more control of that.
From the upsides to the downside. So obviously the platform garden isn't that rosy as well. But we also definitely at this moment really need to talk about the kind of disinformation, misinformation, content moderation chaos as well. Johan, I'm gonna throw it to you. How big of a problem it is, and what are you seeing on kind of top of the bird's eye view on this?
Yeah, it's a pity that you made us promise not to talk about Chat GTP and generative, because creating and distributing disinformation is now so much easier, and it's happening on such bigger scale, and that's only potentially going to increase. So it's there's a lot of emphasis about building media literacy, making sure that not only young people but everybody gets more digital literate in looking critically at media. So yeah.
You're also part of the Digital Media Observatory, right? What it does, and is there any kind of opportunity for, I would say, non-public service media companies to come along as well?
Yeah,
as well as the whole transatlantic approach.
This is another, in my view, pretty fantastic initiative from the European Commission that in all member states there are hubs called Digital Media Observatory hubs, and this brings together fact checkers, news organizations, public service media, all kinds of broadcasters, and also researchers coming together to share expertise on disinformation on a very broad scale. So this goes from exchanging what works in terms of media literacy, also exchanging research data between fact checkers, so that we can then it will become possible to actually do investigative journalism on a pan-European scale, which is not that simple, you can imagine. But also looking at how EU regulation has an impact on the ground. So, for instance, the European Commission has made a, memorandum of understanding with big tech platforms about how their content is being distributed. So, but the question is, how does this have an impact on the way that disinformation is being shared? So, all those this network of EDMO hubs, so European Digital Media Observatory, is now in place, and I look forward to seeing the results of that.
Yeah. And a little bit blatant advertising as well. One of the projects that we're working together is called Media Numeric. It's an extraordinary program where we put together a list of best European fact checkers, journalists, data visualization experts, as well, to both give media content creators, but also somebody on the C-level, etc., and understanding like, hey, what's exactly going on in this space, and how to keep a kind of a watchful eye on this. Later this year, it's going to be also released as a kind of an online resource base and a course. We have there, for example, Agency Press from France and many others. Extraordinary resource to check out.
What I found interesting, actually, connecting this topic of disinformation to platforms, is this question that look at, for instance, public service media, and they produce high quality news by trained journalists who have the time and resources to do investigative journalism. And then the question is, do we want this rich content also connected to and available on platforms like TikTok or YouTube, in the sense that, on one hand you can say it's great that sort of disinformation created by bad actors on TikTok gets they're sort of mixed around with high quality content created by journalists. But you can also say, by having those videos on TikTok actually legitimizes the platform in itself. So it's those are the kind of questions.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary opportunity. Yeah. And by the way, Ofcom says that 20% of customers in the UK get their daily news from TikTok. And that's not my number. Well, I mean, that actually, whose problem is this really, right?
Misinformation.
Yeah, exactly, because it's inherently, in the European view, this is part of our business model, right? We basically say that we're kind of, we have to deliver, if you're not in certain yellow media, that's kind of basically part of our core service. We have to kind of ensure this baseline. Well, Fox News case shows us something completely different.
And remember, Fox News has extensions in the UK and other places as well. So the commercial, I think it's the basic incentive around information. And so unfortunately, most of the companies who traffic most of the information on the planet Earth are for-profit companies whose only mandate is to make more profit. not to protect the culture or protect its users even from misinformation. So there's a chance that Section 230 and we change the rules here, and that will have a global effect on those major platforms. But I think in particular, you guys have the same social media platforms that we do. The difference is that the majority or the most influential news and gathering and information dissemination platforms in Europe are not for-profit organizations.
Yeah.
And so there is a check and balance there that really isn't here. The trust in the media in the United States is at an all-time low. And there are two major inflection points that dictated the lack of trust that American news media generates from its public. One of them was the invention of social media around 2004. You can see in the Gallup poll of trust, you can just see it drop off a cliff from that point. But the more important one was the removal of the Fairness Doctrine in 1987, which was campaigned for by for-profit news gathering organizations. And they went after the administration and got them to get rid of something that was protecting us from talk being considered news. And at that point, Rush Limbaugh went on national radio, and Fox News was invented not long after that. And so if you remove the purely commercial incentive from news, I do think it at least changes the tenor of the conversation in a way that is much more protective and prophylactic than what you see in the United States.
So one of the really interesting things that I think, and let's move to like what could work together is it's quite interesting to see that the opinions on TikTok are basically converging on both sides of the Atlantic, right? Well, in Europe, it's been perceived as a big competitor, but in the past week, the Danish government says no TikTok on admin phones. European Commission says no TikTok on phones. In US, I think the thinking is along the same line. Canada as well. TikTok, yes, no. What's gonna happen, Sander?
I think overall we have options, right? As any country in a world where there are no borders, to decide first of all to defend. That's a defensive strategy, meaning like we're gonna regulate all the global actors. We're gonna protect our local players and local platforms, and not allow essentially anybody in. And that's something that
Predictions on TikTok.
But that's exactly
How long is gonna be around?
For me, TikTok, short answer is it's a political discussion more than it is a product or content or media discussion.
I agree with that. And politics is not just in the destination countries; it's in their owners, the Chinese government too.
I'm not exactly answering my question.
He wants he wants an actual prediction. How long is it going to last?
I think seeing where it's going at the moment, it will not be around for too long.
I agree.
Okay, cool. Who's going to be around? Now looking into the future.
I think there's. I talked about this yesterday, so if you've heard me talk about it, I apologize. But I think there's I think that most of the social media that you see today in Web 2 it's edging near the end of its life expectancy. Doesn't mean it's going to go away. Facebook isn't going to go away. Instagram isn't going to go away. I do think the smaller ones are going to go away. But I think their relevance is going to wane over time for these more, I call them Web 2.5. But if you look at Roblox and you look at Minecraft, you see these social media, commerce, entertainment platforms that are growing with billions of hours of usage, with fully functioning economies and transactions happening on a daily basis. I do think you're going to see things like that. They're already there. 60% of kids under the age of 12 play Minecraft in the United States. 60%, and they're not playing. They're hanging out. They're commuting. They're communing. It's a community, and so I do think we're evolving to a Web 2.5 version of social media. And I don't know. I mean, did we know TikTok was going to emerge out of Musical.ly, which was really born from Vine? I don't know. Somebody's inventing something somewhere that will take the mind space away. But if you want to see where social media is heading, I think spend some time with your kids on Minecraft and Roblox, and then in Fortnite and PUBG and these other areas, because you're going to see what Mark Zuckerberg was wrong about. There's a metaverse already existing. We can already see it happening. the question is, what does it look like that isn't a game? What is the version of it that isn't a game?
Sander, your
Very long answer. I
Sander,
apologize.
your predictions for the near future, especially from both looking from the US-European perspective.
Sure. I think I'm just going to finish the previous thought on the defense side. I think how we're currently approaching most of that space. So things like TikTok that we as political space want to get rid of, we'll get rid of that. But I don't think it's going to really change anything. Like India has banned TikTok already. That just gives YouTube Shorts massive boost. So the medium and the consumption experience is still around. I don't necessarily see any change there. But like if we continue on this kind of defend strategy, meaning like we block everybody else and we focus promoting and protecting the local players on local platforms, I think we just end up in a space which we've seen happening in history many, many times again and again. Like you can go all the way back and see like something like the Locomotive Act to protect the industries around horses. That we want to have 4 people operating a car, one waving a flag in front of it, going super slow, the other one's making sure there's clearance, it's not crashing into anybody. Like we're protecting existing industries. There's other things, obviously, when Gutenberg Press came along, same thing, like churches try regulating it like fully. But again, like market resolves to the best solution in the end. And it's also happened even in search. Like think about, I think it was 2006 when France, together with Germany, funded a search engine called Quero, I think it was called. If you want to Google that later.
I'm an ardent user.
And there's 100 million euros that was given to that. Keep in mind, Google raised 26 before going public. Again, like similarly, market resolved to a better solution. Like it's all about the users, end users, and consumers, and giving them choice so that they can resolve to the best possible solution, rather than us trying to dictate what the outcome should be. So I would much rather like lean more to this rational approach, which is yes, like we need to embrace local content, but we also need to leverage the global platforms for us to help to grow that into something that is bigger than Europe, but also within Europe can be across borders. And I think that's where hopefully we'll see this space going more and more ourselves as well, rather than trying to make the outcome fully regulated. We want to just create more opportunities and equalize the playing field and give people more choice and more access.
So being mindful of time, where exactly is the opportunity right now between US and Europe? Can those two ecosystems start to converge? Is it only going to be driven by, I don't know, Comcast and Sky or those types of things? Or do you really see that there could be some great models coming out? By the way, and also taking into account that US is, by the way, a lead driver for exits for European companies.
Yeah, that's true. The examples you loop in, and there's Money Heist, and there's all these other great. So I do think there's a lot of really good examples of European content makers finding homes and finding really good business models, partnering with American international platforms. I also believe, though, there's a great way to export directly to consumers in the United States. I think what the last couple of years have really demonstrated, including the Academy Awards last night, is that there's a really untapped thirst for content not from America in America. I think Americans have undervalued the intelligence of their own audience for so long. They thought, well, they're never going to read subtitles or they're not going to watch dubbed content. And that's just
what exactly is a foreign film, right?
Right, exactly. I just think it's now just film, right? And it's now just TV. And especially with Gen Z and Gen A, because of platforms like Roblox and Minecraft, where they're talking with people from across the planet, it's a much smaller world for Americans than it ever has been. And I think for Europe to see America as a great place to export their culture to directly, channel by channel, broadcaster by broadcaster, programmer by programmer, creator by creator, there is a huge audience here with a lot of expendable income to put forth on your content. And I think Europe has undersold. We tend to change things when they come here. We do our version of them, and I don't think that's necessary anymore. Bring your content. We want it.
Great stuff. So all the Europeans bring in the content. Sander.
Totally. And I think another good example who's doing it really well is K-pop. Like it's not
totally.
about doing Korean pop music on Korean platforms in Korea.
So
it's about bringing something to the world, leveraging the global platforms to build massive, massive influence of like Korean culture around the world. And I think it's a mindset shift that we need to go through also within Europe. Like we shouldn't really think about like, hey, you know, I'm Estonian, I'm focusing on just Estonian platforms, building Estonian streaming service. Like, let's not worry about the infrastructure that's already there. Let's do something that we're unique about, which is our stories and our local content, our local productions, and then leverage the global platforms to actually bring it to the world and make it so much more efficient, and in the end achieve the goals that we have of like common European culture, but also bring it to the rest of the world.
Johan, InfoSpace. Look, Ukraine is going on. Elections in the US are coming. It's definitely not going to be a factually correct walk in the park. Where's the opportunity here?
Well, let me just connect this to the big platforms discussion that we were just having. There's quite a lot of pushback in Europe about big tech platforms. You know, the fact that monopolies aren't they are not a catalyst for innovation per se. So, and also, for instance, when Twitter was bought a couple of months ago, people in Europe, and I think say again.
I said it was.
So people in Europe, perhaps also in US, but people got quite nervous, and they were, started, I think for good reason, and started looking for
such a great acquisition,
more distributed ways. So so there was, looking at distributed infrastructures is to me also a very, strong way forward. And there's a lot of talk about public organizations using alternative platforms based on public values. So, for instance, in the Netherlands, a couple of years ago, Public Spaces, the foundation started, and with the aim to look at all the tech used by public organizations, not only public service media, but also museums, festivals, governments, and look to what extent they align with public values, and building coalitions how to break the status quo. So instead of saying, there's this big tech monopolies, we just have to play by their rules to say, okay, we actually have economies of scale to do something, opposed to this, and to say there's bargaining power if we work together. So that's something that has a lot of traction now in Europe.
Cool. So quickly to then summarize. Huge opportunities. Definitely what Ivan said, what I think is really, really great, that the big opportunity on the European side is if the PSM media will kind of aggregate themselves into single gateways or single platforms with great offerings. Internet connectivity, we didn't have time to talk about it, but who has the cable and who basically brings the goods through the cable, definitely a major point. Bringing European content to Europe, I think, to the US. I think also a great point as well. Stop complaining about the platforms. I think, Sandra, you said that either you're going to tag along, you're going to build your own, or you're going to die, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Ask him later. And then definitely, I think, especially as I would say the more political info space moments are quite hot, I think making sure that the content, what we put to our audiences, I think the thinking probably is pretty much the same on both sides of the Atlantic, because we both have had not so great experiences around that. The three gentlemen will be here a little bit while. Catch them for exciting conversations. Thank you very much. I think let's make some exciting transatlantic partnerships. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Stan, Evan, Sander, and Johan for this very cool discussion. Now it's time for the second part of our event, which will be the startup presentations and the keynote on the metaverse. And we will kick things off with an introduction by FIT. So Natalie and Alexander, I would like to welcome you to stage.
Good morning, everyone. We are grateful to introduce Belgium, Flanders, and of course FIT today. I'm Natalie. This is my colleague Alexander. Belgium is a small country. We have a population of just under 12 million people. We're mostly known for, of course, our beers, chocolates, waffles, and our amazing music festivals like Tomorrowland. So it can still come to a surprise that we do have a substantial presence on the international scene. Economically, we are the, oops, I think I have to actually use this. Economically, we are the third most innovative economy worldwide, thank you. Powered by the fourth most productive workforce globally. Politically, we are the headquarters of the EU, NATO, and numerous other international organizations. When it comes to Belgium, Flanders is the proud leader on international trade. We represent 58% of the population, 60% of all foreign direct investment, and 83% of all exports. Flanders truly is an export king, thanks to our expansive network of roads, railroads, airports, and of course our seaports. The Port of Antwerp is the second largest port in all of Europe and the largest petrochemical cluster in Europe. But what makes us truly special is our people and our location. We grew up learning French, Flemish, of course, or Dutch, German, and of course English, which is very convenient when trying to penetrate the European market even further. As for our location, we are very centrally located. We are called the Gateway to Europe, located less than 310 miles of other European cities like Paris, London, Amsterdam. You can reach them all within 2 to 3 hours by train or airplane.
Thank you very much, Natalie. The state of Texas and the region of Flanders have a lot in common when we talk about technology. Just like Texas, Flanders is one big ranch for digital, biotech, and climate technology innovation. This is all driven by our many startups, scale-ups, research institutes, and universities, and so on. We are always very proud of our young visionary cowboys and cowgirls, those being our technology entrepreneurs and investors, that they are either being present here today or they spend a number of years either studying or working here in the Silicon Hills or in other regions of the United States, like, for example, Silicon Valley and New York. We feel very proud and privileged about our relationship with Texas and the United States. A lot of companies headquartered here in Texas, think about, for example, Oracle, Dell, Hewlett-Packard, and so on. They are all very proud to call Flanders their home. And for example, a lot of US companies, for example, you can see, oh, sorry. So you see on the slides some of the US technology companies based in Flanders and Belgium. And a fun fact is that each of them are just a few miles away from one of our many famous beer breweries. So cheers to that. And one last fact about Flanders is that we spend over 3.6% of our GDP into research and development spending. And over 70% of that is IT related. So that makes Flanders truly a front runner when it comes to innovation.
Thanks, Alex. I wanted to quickly introduce, of course, what we do at FIT, Flanders Investment and Trade. So what we do is two-sided. We focus on increasing international trade between Flemish companies and foreign companies. We also assist foreign companies expand into Flanders and into Europe. How we do this is we help with market research, we can help with site selection, we can look at potential lists of clients or distributors that you are looking for. We can also make introductions with financial institutions, we can put you into contact with the appropriate regulators and look at potential economic incentives that you may qualify for. We are an economic arm of the government, so we are an official government agency, which means that our services are 100% free. There's no catch, we promise. So if you are interested in setting foot into Europe and consider Flanders as your first stop, please don't hesitate to contact us. We will be here and we are very happy to assist and to help.
Thank you. For the first pitch, I would like to warmly introduce you to one of our Flemish companies that we are very proud of. It's a company based in Leuven in Belgium. The company is called Twipe Mobile Solutions, and I will leave it up to them to explain what they do and what they stand for, but they have done tremendous work in Europe and now also in the United States. Please give a warm round of applause for the Head of Business Development and Incubation of Twipe Mobile Solution, Mrs. Dana Nastase.
Thank you for the introduction, Alexander. Can you hear me well? Maybe closer, better like this? It is better, okay. So, this device goes to slides. All right, so thanks for welcoming us here. Thanks to the future media hubs. Thanks to Flanders Investment and Trade. I think thanks to South by Southwest and to this city for getting us here and all this innovation and boots. It's a souvenir to live with. I'm here to talk to you about Twipe. I have 5 minutes to introduce what we do at Twipe. So we are a company based in Belgium, as mentioned by Alexander. We're based in a city called Leuven, a beautiful town, 20 minutes away from Brussels. And we work with newspaper publishers. So we heard the panelists talking a lot about more the new media or broadcasting. We are partnering mainly with what would be called traditional media, let's say, and primarily newspaper publishers. And the reason why we do what we do is because newspaper publishers, as you may know, are going through challenging times. So on the one hand, the print distribution and the print demand is declining, right? And together with that, also the advertising revenue and the subscriptions revenues that are linked to that. And on the other hand, it's been very difficult to convince different audiences to pay for news. This is data from a while ago published by the World Economic Forum, which shows that under 20% of readers are actually willing to pay. It is promising, though, to see that more people would be willing to pay. It was very interesting to hear Evan talking about his survey about what would make people pay and about flexibility and so on and so forth. And actually, recently there was new data released which shows that those numbers have increased, which is really promising. And the reason why I love to share this picture is, and I've seen it first presented by Professor Mario Garcia, you may know him at a great event in Germany, is because ultimately the needs of people don't change. It's the technology and the platforms, if you want, or the places where they consume their news is what changes. And that's also what we're trying to do at Twipe. We're trying to understand what kind of technologies can we build to help newspaper publishers deliver to the news to people in ways that they would want to pay for it. And the other reason why I love this image is because it shows the complexity of audiences of newspaper publishers. Maybe more so than other newer media companies, I think they have this very broad audience, ranging from baby boomers who are there and they demand a product that would be good and digital, all the way to the Generation Alpha, Generation Z, all Minecraft and Roblox people, right, kids. The problem is that we have to create a product that would address all those generations and convince them to pay. So often if we think, okay, what is that product? We most often think of an app, and that's also what we're working on. It would include some form of personalization. Maybe it would bring content at the right time to people. Maybe it would be audio. Maybe so everybody we ask has a bit of a different opinion about what is the news product that they would want to pay for. And that's actually what we work with, try to discover at Twipe. So we're on a mission to help newspaper publishers find the right products to monetize, to engage their readers and help them monetize the premium content. And we are a 12-year-old company, so based in Belgium, and we've over the years we've managed to do that and build a platform. We talked earlier about platforms in local environments, so we are one of them in Europe, working primarily with newspaper publishers, and we've done that with digital publishing technologies, with what we call edition creation technologies. We're very big advocates of finite formats. And an interesting maybe thing to watch is, for those who don't know it, and talking about thirst of European content in America, the Financial Times just launched their FT Edit, which is an interesting app, into the US. We work with data and analytics, we work with personalization, so variety of technologies on one platform to try to help newspaper publishers create news apps engaging news apps that would convince essentially readers to pay. We already work with a number of publishers in Europe, so we're based in Belgium. We work with companies in France like Le Monde, Le Parisien, Centre France, Ouest France, but also we've expanded recently to the US market, so very happy to be here and very proud to be the lion of export of the Flanders Investment and Trade. So in our category, the company with most impact in export. This is a quote from the COO of the Telegraph saying that next to Adobe and Google, we are the third strategic partner. It's a lot of pressure on our shoulders, but very happy to be able to do that. And the other thing that we do a lot, we're next to the University of Leuven, which is one of the most prestigious universities in Europe, and we engage a lot with them to do research and innovation. This is a project where we equipped people with a lot of fancy sensors, pupil tracking, and so on, to understand what happens in people's bodies when they read news digitally, text, right? There's 2 or 3 PhDs that were written out of that, and I can provide more information if it'd be interesting. And we do also a lot of our own proprietary research, discussing how do we create digital editions, so these finite formats for mobile devices, formats that people would be willing to pay for. Not necessarily website or news flows, but really formats that can help drive habit, fit in people's life. I can tell you more about it if I'll be sticking around if you are interested. And the other thing that we do is we're trying to create a community of publishers, and we also organize some events. This is a view from our past event in London where we talked about Web3, Metaverse, what can newspaper publishers learn from that. The next one is coming up in September, on September 27th, where I think if you're interested to join us, you can join us. These are our team, so we call ourselves the Twipes, and we're a company of about 45 people. But 2 of us are here today, so myself and Nicolas, who is with a Texan hat in the back. And if you would be interested to join us for the summit, you can pre-register via the QR code, and we'll send you more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana. Now it's time for our second startup, which is Femfeel, and Marie is coming to me. Marie will present us Femfeel.
Hello, I'm Marie, and I would like to start with a short mind experiment. Imagine you're permanently suffering from an inner restlessness. At night, you wake up because an immense heat rolls like a wave through your whole body. During the day, your brain feels foggy, and constantly something hurts at a different part of your body. However, none of the doctors you consulted can tell you why. This is how my mother felt during her menopause, and we soon realized she's not alone. I'm actually pretty sure you all know someone who goes through this, because every woman experiences menopause at a certain point in her life, and 2/3 of these women suffer from symptoms like my mother. And these symptoms last up to 15 years. However, 70% of women do not treat their symptoms. Why is that? Well, menopause is still a big taboo topic, barely covered by media, and the information which is available online is very fractured, leading to the situation that women simply don't know what they can do. And this is what we want to change. We are Femfeel, and we're on a mission to enable every woman a symptom-free menopause. Scientific studies show that it's the simple things that can have a huge impact. Regular physical activity, stress reduction, and a plant-based diet. To make interventions in these 3 areas actionable, it is super important that the content is tailored to menopause. Take sport videos as an example. There are a lot of videos available online on YouTube or in fitness apps which are tailored to young people that want to get fit and toned. However, there's a lack of content that is tailored to menopause, for example, feasible with joint problems or without jumping due to incontinence, or just provided by coaches in their age. So what we do, we build up a database with content pieces keep content pieces that are effective in menopause, and make women feel good. And we take data points like age, menopausal symptoms, or preferences to provide every woman with the content she needs. By providing personalized, digestible content along the whole menopause journey, we ensure that every woman finds her individual menopause strategy. A majority of our content is bundled into 8-week programs, which are each provided by certified experts. And the aim of each program is to form a new habit that relieves the menopausal symptoms. And all of our content is provided through our Femfeel app, a women's digital menopause companion. Besides the programs, we offer educational content, quick reliefs in cases of acute cases of symptoms, and we ensure habit formation through community, daily motivation, and progress tracking. And where are we today? We launched our German app 4 months ago. We currently have 4,000 downloads and 900 monthly active users. And we built up a unique menopause-specific content database with content pieces including 3 8-week courses that relieve menopausal symptoms. We have knowledge articles by experts. We have experience reports from women that are affected, and much more. And we will grow this database constantly based on research results and the needs of our growing and engaged community. To accelerate speed, we entered the market with a B2C freemium business model, which we plan to expand to B2B this year, as offering employees menopause care can significantly reduce the high costs due to menopause-related sick days and productivity loss at the workplace. And it's a perfect timing to enter the market now. By 2025, 1 billion women will be in menopause. So the market is huge and barely saturated. While the US market already has some players that serve as a proof of concept, the European and especially German market lack a digital holistic solution for menopause symptom relief. So time to close the menopause care gap. Our vision is to accompany every woman along their whole menopause journey, so up to 10 years, by providing personalized content and services. One essential step towards that direction is building up a so far unique health database. And therefore, we are focused on building a strong community which is willing to share their data and feedback. And we're exactly the right team to achieve that goal, because with us, empathy meets technology. With our background in human-centered design and computer science, we strive for building an empathetic, evidence-based menopause journey. The scientific and medical knowledge is covered by our expert board, and the content is created by certified coaches. Help us to become even louder. We are looking for media companies that break the taboo of menopause with us by covering the topic. Let's smash the taboo together for our mothers today, for us tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marie. So, up next we have an interesting talk of 2 wonderful people. I would like to ask Sophie Hitved and our Boekeholm, I have to check, Hansen, Boekeholm Hansen, to come on the stage. They will tell us more on how to enter the metaverse safely. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, as you can see, I will be doing the presentation alone, and Boogie will just be hanging out over there and answering a lot of questions if you have any. So he's my colleague at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, but we thought that with the time that we have and with the focus that we have, I'm going to run you through. Please ask questions if you want during this, because I love an interactive audience. So female power, yeah. And also, I don't know, did any of you see Amy Webb, the trend? And yeah. There was a lot of going on, like, you're my tribe, and, we need to create that kind of sort of a common, maybe not all that way, but we have to look at the media landscape in a different way. So, clicker, where are thou? So my talk today is about entering the metaverse and ensuring that we are moving into this space in a responsible way. So this is something that I find super important to embrace and to acknowledge and to understand. So I will take you a little bit about our way of looking at this at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies and how we work with this, because I don't know if you've seen this little dough over here. Sometimes you can feel like that when you try to enter some of these new spaces. Even Shapiro and Sander on stage were talking about roadblocks and understanding that. And a lot of us here, I don't know, but a lot of it, at least the elder generation, have a difficulty in understanding that. So, quick intro. How many in here know the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies? Great, okay, so a bit of you know it already. We're one of the oldest futures institutes in the world. So we are from '69. We were founded by the former OECD General Secretary, who is Torkel Christensen. So in the beginning, it was a very political thing, and very much focusing on politics, taking that into a long-term perspective, and driving us away from what we call short-termism. This idea that we all the time work with strategies that come for the next 3 years, because that's when we can see the return on investment. That's what we can measure, and that's where we can, we have enough data that we can actually act on that. But we want to take it further, and we want to take it more long-term. So that's the whole idea into driving innovation and inspire change. So a little bit about me. I'm head of media at the Institute. I've been there for 5 years. I'm a senior advisor, and I dive a lot into the future of the way we communicate, the future of the way that we interact. So this is sort of only the focus that I have. And for the last couple of years, I've been working on the future of the metaverse. I'm also member of the Danish Media Board, where we have some money that we give out to the Danish media industry. But those money and the money that we give out there is based upon old media structures. So there is absolutely almost no innovative projects going on there. It's really pointing towards the, I would say, the sort of old traditional media system and the media industry. And we have to try to look into the new structures and the new ways and make a new vocabulary on what is media. So it's not our goal, just to make that clear. We do not predict things. We only want to ensure that we are prepared for what is to come, for the possible futures, because there is no future. There are only possible futures, because nobody can predict what's going to happen. But we can see that some huge things are happening. And we are in the middle of tectonic changes in the media industry. We could hear that on stage for those of you who were here for the panel early on. And also when you hear the different talks around town. So, what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word metaverse? This is where we have to be interactive. Hit it. VR. Sorry? VR? Yeah. Complex. Indeed. I love it. Anybody? Come, feel free.
Second Life.
Second Life, yeah? Dynamic. Yeah, a lot of good stuff going on there. It's really interesting. A lot of people say Zuckerberg. A lot of people say Meta. Second Life is also one. Boring is the first time I heard that, though. But the best one I heard a couple of weeks ago is that the metaverse is misunderstood. I think that we do not understand that long-term thing. So we keep on diving into this hype, these things that we can see right now. Again, this short-termism on what we see. Right now, Meta is about to denounce the metaverse. It's like, what? How can you denounce something? I know Evan, he said that the metaverse is already here, somewhere or the other. We are launching tomorrow a new Delphi study with experts around the world, so global experts on their view of the future of the metaverse. And more than half of them think that the metaverse is already here. I don't. But I mean, it's just a matter of what kind of words you use. But I think it's a shame if we think that what we see now is what will become. For me, and for us at the Institute, it's more about the direction that it's hitting. So if we put too much attention on what is here now, we will lose the ability to see on a more long-term perspective. So I know it's a bit small, I don't know if all of you can see it, but we created this basic metaverse map for a conference we did a couple of months ago in Copenhagen together with the Confederation of Danish Industry called the Nordic Metaverse Summit. Because when we started creating that conference, we quickly figured out that when we say the word metaverse, people think different things and don't understand why is this on a metaverse conference? Why is that? How many here think that Web3 should be the overall sort of umbrella for the metaverse? A couple. How many think that the metaverse isn't sort of overall for everything that's happening in immersive and Web3 is underneath? Okay, that's what we think. We believe, and anyway, that's how we work with the term the metaverse. So, I'll quickly explain to you, right? The basic metaverse map is all about understanding the complexity. That's what one of the words. With of course, the user in the middle. Let's keep it that way, that we are focusing on the human, on the person in the middle. So we have user avatars. They could be individuals, it could be organizations, it can be brands. We're seeing it already with the avatars. But then we have the virtual worlds, and those were the ones that, for instance, Evan was referring to when he talks about Roblox, when he talks about these different worlds, also when we talk about Decentraland. This is where we're at. But there's a huge thing going on digital twins, in making a map of our Earth, in making a map about everything that can really change the way we interact and the way we sort of work with this. Then we have the whole extended reality, and we have to be aware that it's not just about VR, it's also very much indeed about the augmented reality. So this mixed reality that we're moving in, and I think that we really need to pay attention to this part, the augmented reality. Then of course part of this as well is AI, because a lot of this content will be built by AI. And again, tokenization and Web3, the distributed, decentral blockchain, is also a part of the metaverse, but it is not clear whether it will happen. So Evan Shapiro, he talked about Web 2.5, right? That kind of middle way, where it might not be so utopian in the sense of decentralization, but something new is going on. And we have to figure out what is that new thing. Because one thing is a lot of people really want Web3, but realistically, at least also in the Delphi we did, they don't believe it's going to happen because the market will control it. So we will figure out. Well, now, one of the new projects by Zuckerberg is a decentralized social network. So I'm not sure how he's going to do that. That's going to be interesting. How many of you believe that Meta can do that? But you believe it will happen? Oh, we have a futurist in the house. No, but we don't really know that, do we? We don't. It depends on how it's going to run out. So it's really interesting to see the different dynamics that are happening right now. Internet of Things, let's not forget that, even though that was a word we were talking about a long time ago, but this is part of the whole sort of gathering it all together, right? So all of this, in the way that we see it, is the metaverse. So let's stop the discussion on what to call it, and then focus on the direction and the possible implications. Because no matter what we choose to call these things, that will have a huge implication on our lives. So, yeah, there it goes. This, in my sense, and the way that we see it, is something that is really defining what the metaverse might become. This convergence of our physical and virtual lives. So this will, both be in these virtual reality worlds, like, let's say, Ready Player One. How many of you saw that? Yeah, that's kind of dystopian, right? We don't want to go there, but a lot of great things can also happen within the virtual reality space, and you've probably also seen that today, or this week here at South by. But actually, we believe that this way of integrating information as layers upon our physical lives is the way it's going to move. So we had at the Nordic Metaverse Summit, we had a researcher from Ericsson Research Lab, and he said the future of the metaverse is not in the virtual worlds. I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah, because he thinks the future of the metaverse is in the physical world. So with the virtual layers on top of it. And I think he's got a point. Because who wants to be, how many of you have tried VR? Well, okay, so do you want to be there more than, let's say, 1 hour, 2 hours a day? I mean, something is happening. We don't know what technology is going to sort of enable these things, but it's worth paying attention to what we actually want and where we're actually feeling, that we are being able to navigate. So, what is real? I think this is a real question that we have to ask ourselves. I don't know if you can see this one. It's a really nice comic strip by Matt Percival, and there's this little kid being really depressed, and then a dad standing on top, with his VR glasses saying, "One day, son, all of this will be yours." It's like, what world is it that we're actually creating right now? But I think that we have to look at this differently. So I think it's like this. We have to try to understand, why is it that it creates so much value? And I totally agree when they say, if you haven't yet, go and see your kids or see some kids playing and figure out what is it that really creates value for them. And it doesn't just have to be kids. I mean, there are a lot of grown-ups in these worlds as well. But really figuring out, is this physical table more valuable than a virtual one? And how do we actually work in that sort of balanced fields? Because I think we're definitely going to move into that. Gen Z is the first generation to feel more like themselves in the metaverse than in the real life. I would then not call it the metaverse, but in some sort of virtual world. That is, it's a survey that was being done by Vice Media and somebody called Razorfish on 3,000 gamers here in the US. And for the first time, 52%, more than half of the Gen Z feels more like themselves. So how do we navigate in that? You know, what does that mean on a more sort of societal level? Where are we heading? We need to figure out. And this is where, of course, media comes in later on. You know, a lot of things are going on. I didn't do a ChatGPT intro as well, but I would like to say GPT-4 is coming. And I don't know if you've seen these things, like the prompting of the future content, right? Have you heard about Radio GPT? It's a radio channel that is fully powered by GPT. So it's like an AI-generated radio. Have you heard about Boomi? Boomi.com are creating AI songs. And they already created more than 12% of internet songs content in the world. Because it's just like endless going, you know? Quality, who knows? But a lot of content. I don't know if you've seen this one. This is also an interesting one. This is called Nothing Forever. So that's a Seinfeld show that's being generated with an AI talking to an AI, or machine learning. Don't let us go there. Again, the words sometimes, but the whole idea is that you have like two machines talking together, creating content constantly. So it's endless media. It's the beginning of endless media. So what does that mean for quality, and what does that mean for our way, and especially the user's way of understanding what media is what, and all these kinds of things. And I don't know if you saw Greg Brockman, the co-founder of OpenAI. He was here a couple of days ago. Did anybody go? Yep. So he said, it's the frontier of personalized media. A lot of things are happening in this AI created, especially when you put it together with the metaverse as well. So if algorithms take over part of the role, and let's say part of the role because they will be co-creators together with us, as both content producer and curator of information, how will this impact the media industry? I wrote an article a year ago, what if 99% of the metaverse is created by AI? I think it's a question we need to dive into, because what does that mean for content, curation, and these kind of things? How do we ensure that both the media industry and the audience have the capabilities to navigate in the new virtual era? That's what I'm here to talk about today. So there's an immediate need to establish a common vocabulary for comprehending the metaverse and kickstart and advance the dialogue and ensure a responsible digitalization of the industry. Because we are in this, tectonic changes. So we would like to start the dialogue about meta-literacy. Today on stage, they talked about media literacy, they talked about digital literacy. And I'd like to dive a little bit into that, because I recently got hands of this book. It's a guidelines for teachers and educators on tackling disinformation and promoting digital literacy through education and training. So that's a report from the EU. So in there, they say, information for the public good, that's sort of information literacy. The ability to understand information for public good, the ability to critically engage with information, media, and digital communication for participation in sustainable development goals, and the ability to seek and enjoy the full benefits of fundamental human rights. That's information literacy. Media literacy is about accessing media to understand and critically evaluate different aspects of the media and media contexts, and to create communications in various contexts. Digital literacy is the ability to access, manage, understand, integrate, communicate, evaluate, create, and disseminate information safely and appropriately through digital technologies, and includes competences that are variously referred to as information literacy and media literacy, computer and ICT literacy. A lot of different literacies, right? But you know what? In that report, they don't talk about AR, they don't talk about VR, they don't mention virtual worlds, very much at least. So it seems like something is lacking in this way of understanding our literacy. So we'd like to start the conversation on meta-literacy, the understanding of the new dynamics and the need for critical thinking in a digital age. Meta-literacy challenges the conventional approach to information literacy by incorporating the creator economy and new technologies such as virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and synthetic content creation. Because these are some of the things that are not being discussed in the way that we approach media and the way that we as a media industry, how many in here are from the media industry? All right, because it's really an important role right now to understand what is your responsibility right now when starting to entering this space. Because there are a lot of challenges. I will not be using so much time on that, but there are a lot of challenges. Unclear boundaries between virtual and physical realities, issues of on and offboarding, digital poverty and polarization, harassment, abuse, and dark patterns. Especially dark patterns are really interesting right now. A lot of sort of lawsuits are going on with some of the big firms behind some of the worlds that are mentioned right now. Platform accountability, privacy, identity, and secure data. And of course, who owns the truth in the metaverse? With all this content going out there, how will the users be able to sort of navigate into this space? Especially when you suddenly meet someone who looks extremely credible and who has also this sort of convincing tone as Sydney. How many of you know Sydney? That suddenly arose from Bing, the ChatGPT, and suddenly was, trying to convince the New York Times journalist to sort of leave his wife in a very, very convincing way. I mean, that is very scary. With information suddenly trying to pursue you to something that is simply not true and is not good for you. So, who is responsible? Bringing public value to new virtual dynamics. So this is a quote from Marje. Is Marje here today? Yes, there you go. So pay attention to the people I'm going to talk about now, because these are the ones that you can talk on later on as well, who are trying to actually dip their toes into these new metaverse, whatever it will become, ways of communicating and ways of storytelling and information and engaging new audiences. So we live in a polarized society, but we also live together in a democracy. In the real world, and I would probably correct you and say physical world, because who knows which one is more real than the other. In the real world and in Web3, new standards of manners and ethics exist. How can we bring public value to new virtual dynamics? The metaverse could include a public space where we can meet up, connect, and co-create. So before I dive into it, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of European media who are dipping their toes into this, because I think this is what we need to do in order to become meta-literacy, in order to understand these new dynamics of the virtual sort of digital age we're coming into. So be curious, dip your toes, share your knowledge, which we're doing now, but we need to do that even more in order to become even better in understanding the implications and how we do this and what it actually is. Establish a digital ethical compass. Be aware of the possible consequences it can have. And that's, I think, is a really important thing. Do any of you work with ethical sort of compasses when you enter the digital space? What a weird question. Please raise your hands. All of you, okay. Think about long-term user welfare. That's a term that I recently stumbled upon. So, clicks and all that, that's short-term. But instead of just doing how many clicks did we do today, think about, are we creating long-term user welfare with this that we're doing? I think that's a very important way to go at it. And try to see if you can create sort of algorithms that points towards that. That will be your KPI and not just the short-term clicking. So lean into the possible futures. That is my sort of main goal from here. So here we go. A couple of European media that are leaning into the future. First, France Television, where are you? Are you here? There, over there. with the white jacket over there. And feel free to go and talk, because that's also why you're here, to network and share your experiences. You can see this. That is a virtual world, a virtual studio that is available in the VR chat, set up for the fortnight in the Roland Garros Stadium. Yeah. And it took 2 months to develop. It had 2 developers, and it's from the French Open back in May. So it was an opportunity to test the technical limits of these platforms and understand the ethical issues, as well as accompany the audiences in their appropriation of new technologies by offering them quality content in a protected space. I think that's an interesting thing, right? Making a safe space, safeguarding the metaverse in that sense. So a couple of the key learnings. And I mean, you can go and talk afterwards as well. Great interest from the advertising units as tools to push forward storytelling about brands inside there. For the time being, no monetization model for advertising. That's the thing. We cannot monetize what's happening in this. So that's really an issue right now, and figuring out how you do that. They do that in Roblox. I know already, so it's going to be interesting how that works out. More divided reactions from the public, curiosity, but also mistrust. And we could spend half an hour talking about some of these key learnings, right? And it's limited to 40 people. This is also why right now the metaverse is not really here yet. It is so limited right now. And the technology, the ones of you who tried it, is simply not very good yet. Anyway, and it's also not quality users. Change to work with content creators from these virtual worlds and the communities, and it takes time to experiment. And you need to update content regularly. So Vincent, is Vincent here as well? No? Okay, so then go out, reach out there. Yes, just a quote as well. It is essential for France Télévisions to anticipate the users of tomorrow and to imagine these new forms of interaction made possible by these immersive technologies in order to build the future France Télévisions offer. Again, dipping the toes, right? These tests conducted at the RG Lab are an opportunity to prepare to the entry into Web 3.0. So there you have it. They talk about Web 3, yeah, in this interchangeable way with the metaverse and the way that you talk about that. So this one is a really interesting project as well. It's from Banvara, Holland. Where are you? Yes, again, there's there. And either more, there are 2. Yeah, good. It's called The Nightstand. So this was a sex education platform for the LGBTIQ plus teens, where they can safely learn about their first time in augmented reality. So by choosing what they want to see and from what angle that they want to experience it. So Dutch teenagers are in total control of the story, using the character customization tool, and every user can create a scenario where they feel represented to the main story. So that's a really interesting thing, you know, something that might seem a little bit scary. You can actually try to help the teenagers into getting into this safe space. So it took about 3 months. You know, there was a lot of user research, interviewing the community, and writing scenarios. Love it. We should do more of that. So a couple of key learnings here. After creating a lesson designed for boys that like boys, and lessons for girls that like girls, their goal is to co-create lessons for every color of the pride flag together with the queer teens. Using the character customization tools, girls are able to create a character that they can truly identify with. Again, back to that thing of where do you identify mostly as yourself, and test these boundaries. Creating a world that is safe and available for everyone, which is also an amazing opportunity. Regardless, for example, gender, sexuality, age, or race is one of the most important aspects of researching the metaverse. So feel free to reach out to Marje, is that correctly? Yeah. Marje. All right. So here we go. Wiley, Finnish Independence Day in Independence Day ball in Roblox. I'm going to show a short clip, and I hope that there's sound on. Yeah, check. There we go. It's short. Pay attention.
Nyt ne tulee! Katso!
So, this is called big hand. Woo! a lot of people coming in to party at the castle. That was really nice. So the thing was actually really fun, right? So we have Vesa, he's sitting over there. You feel free to reach out from YLE. They anticipated about 100 kids, and suddenly 23,000 kids showed up in 3 hours. And I just told you, I don't think it's about KPIs, it's about dipping your toes, but that's pretty amazing, right? That you can actually engage so many kids into these worlds that are so excited that you could hear as well. So everyone was invited to join using their best Roblox dress, you know, really testing things. And if you go and check it out, there are a lot of really interesting things that they chose to come in. And it was built in 2 months with 10,000 euros with the help of a 17-year-old talent. So again, co-creating together with the users. Yeah, and then it's not just the kids. 40% were grown-ups. And I think there are obviously also some interesting aspects of that, like how do they interact with kids and how do you make sure that everybody feels safe. But the metaverse has a potential to offer a safe place to whoever you feel you are. And as you say, the metaverse is here. We may not recognize it because the change is again driven by the young for the young. So if you look at the young, a lot of them, the metaverse is already here. Again, at the Nordic Metaverse Summit, some of them said that, you know, the metaverse is already like a boomer word. So young people don't really identify with calling it the metaverse. Again, and we have to figure out how we talk about this. But it's definitely an interesting aspect. So XR Spaces from Germany. It's a place where community can build communities inside the metaverse. And where do we have XR Spaces? Yeah, all right, so feel free again to reach out. So this is an ongoing project where you can create virtual spaces for communities in cooperation with the community and connect spaces created by community. And it offers various different ways of entering this. Art exhibitions, museums, virtual learning spaces, showrooms for companies, virtual discos, and all that. And it enables the entry into the metaverse. And it's both in 2D and 3D, so you can enter it both on the desktop and in 3D worlds. And if you want to hear more about the experiences in that, and also maybe how you can create a community for a community, feel free to reach out over to Silke. All right. A lot of people have little or no knowledge of the metaverse, and it's not likely that they will be active soon in virtual platforms. How can you inform them about the metaverse outside the metaverse? Identity is a fluid concept in the digital world, a world in which we are living longer and longer. So what does the metaverse and machine learning mean for us humans as broadcasters that believes in creation and in real conversations? We need to investigate and interpret this. That is the digital strategist of EO. Are you here? Is he here? No. Outside, not listening. Oh my God, that's all right. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. All right. So this is MetaHuman, the project from NPO EO. What is the meaning of digital life? And as you can see here, they created a MetaHuman called Meta Martin. So they also have a female created, and probably more to come. So this is, of course, experimenting this world of synthetic media and sort of new ways to interact with the audience. So it costed about $16,000. You know, of course, you're interested in how much do you actually invest when dipping your toes. And just to say one thing, don't buy land in Decentraland. If you want to go in there and test, you know, you can rent it. Okay, so I would recommend that. Quick, funny story, because I don't have much time. EY, you know, the consultancy, they rented some land in order to experiment with their clients. Suddenly, porn industry moved in next door with a very big dildo on top of the house. So be aware where you place your public service or the media company, right? Sorry about that little thing here. The thing is that it lets audience get acquainted with the metaverse outside the metaverse, like meeting this kind of virtual world, meeting the virtual identities, and trying to test that. And they can ask questions during meetups, you know, and they have an Instagram channel. They, he, it, Meta Sarah. They're like, you know, participating in physical things in the physical world. So that kind of interaction is really interesting to see. One of the key learnings is that virtual worlds and beings are very hard to find and grasp for most people, and it will take time to gain confidence of your colleagues and your audiences. So that was it for the presentation of some of the European media that are dipping their toes into the metaverse. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of other people sitting around here have some really good examples. So, share your knowledge, talk to each other here, and go in and ask about the different projects. And if you want to know more about the metaverse, you can find us as well talking about the metaverse and our thoughts on it from the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies here at South by. But else, feel free to reach out if you want to talk more. And thank you so much to Sarah Gerums for making this event come to life, and to and team. Sorry, yeah. And partner, okay, give me the whole list. Partners, sponsors, all of you audiences for actually being here. We really appreciate that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Now it's time for the second round of startups, who will be introduced by Stadiem. Stadiem is the #1 accelerator for media in Europe, and Peter will tell you all about it.
Thank you. It's almost 12 o'clock. Who is still awake? Yes, all right. I would like to talk to you about Stadiem, which is, as I said, the #1 accelerator for media, specifically for media in Europe. And we built him, and we're all planning to build, we started to build it 2 years ago. Stadiem stands for Startup-Driven Innovation in Media. There's already a question?
How is #1 defined?
That's a good question. We will see later on why I will say that it's the #1 in Europe. But I can answer this, that is in the previous talk, we talked about think big enough in Europe, think cross-border, and that's why I think this is the #1 media accelerator in Europe. So I will explain shortly why we build it, what we do, actually, what is the program about, and also which top scale-ups you should know after this and taking home. So to come back 2 years ago, this is what we saw in Europe. Actually, we saw that we are a lot of media players, but we are, if you look at globally, there are micro-sized media players. You have the virtual borders. We speak different languages. We have different cultures. We also saw a lack of investment, and if there was investment in startups, it was mostly done in regional countries. And of course, there was and there still is the global competition around media. So that's actually why we started Stadiem, this acceleration program. We are 4 companies, but around the 4 companies, and that's what you see in the left, we have the whole ecosystem, the whole media ecosystem of Europe. I shortly will go through who is in there, but the main mission of what we do with Stadiem is create a pan-European community for innovation power players, develop a framework, how we do it, develop a framework of taking innovative technologies to these media corporates, run 2 cohorts, that's what we do with pilots, and also we drive business value through startup and corporate collaborations. That's what we do. So I went a little bit too fast. I just wanted to see in the center, you have the 4 companies, and in the center, you have the format. This is how we do it. We have 5 steps how we take these new technologies into these media companies. It starts with mapping opportunity spotting. Where can we connect the startups to the media companies, and what are the challenges of the media companies? Then we go to the match phase, we connect them. Then we go to the develop phase. We co-create the products, the media products. Then we go to the integrate phase. And finally, we go to the pilot phase. And piloting is going live with your solution as a startup live on a media, in a media company across Europe. So, of course, we define the challenges. I think that most of you know right now what are the challenges in media, but to give you an idea, it's about finding solutions around new journalism, journalism 4.0, about disinformation, about everything that has to do with data, AI, ML, synthetic media, also new ways of monetization. So these are the challenges we have. And we have 3 years to build it. We're now in year 2, and that's what I wanted to explain. Where are we right now? We had also a budget of Europe, 5.8 million for the 3 years to build it. And we are 7 partners. 7 partners, well chosen, And we think that we bring on 360-degree experience in the media field to make this work for Europe. We have, as I said, 2 cohorts. And these 2 cohorts there, we had almost 200 startups that went through these cohorts. So we reached out and we really had a lot of attraction during the 2 cohorts. And I will quickly explain also which kind of startups that were in there. Before I go to the startups, I wanted to explain who is behind this. And it's actually VRT, the company I work for. It's a public broadcaster of Flanders. We also have NMA there. NMA is an accelerator of Germany. We have Media City Bergen on the right. That's a network of media organizations in the Nordics. And we have also Storytech, which is a venture studio in Estonia. And then you also have EBU, which is the network of public broadcasters in Europe. You have also Martel, which is they are in Switzerland. And then you also have F6S. It's also a startup organization in the UK. So these are the 7 partners. As I said, 2 times 400 applications. From the 400, we had 200 that were really applicable for the startup project. And then from the 200, we took out 40. So that means that 2 times 40 startups, the best ones of Europe, we know and we guide them for 12 months. You always need one slide where there's too much info up. This one is mine. But if you have to remember one thing of this slide is that, as I said, we have 2 times 200 startups coming in. We guide them and we select 20. And from the 20, only 4 reach the end of the trajectory of 12 months. So they go live with their product and we guide them 12 months to make their product better. They get the feedback of the media companies. And we, as media companies, we learn from them and we try to innovate our own companies. That's how it works. We connect them with over 70 media players in Europe and even across the world. So that's the amount of media companies involved in Stadium at the moment. And let's have a look at which countries we are looking in. A lot of UK, a lot of Germany, but also a lot of Spain, a lot of the Nordics. So that's where they are coming from. When we look at the media part, we connect them to media companies also across Europe, but even here in the States, we work together with Sony, with Warner, some media players from Canada. So it's not only a European game, we connect them to the world, let's say. Okay, what is the impact for the investors? Are there investors in the room? The impact for investors is actually that we saw that 5 of them were acquired. So Fansifter was acquired, Music Cube was acquired, Utelli was acquired by bigger companies, and also the younger ones, let's say Data Village, Zazu, Film Chain, Einblick, they got money. They got to raise money. So if you're interested in this program and you're an investor, feel free to reach out. So that's the impact for the investors. Which kind of companies are we talking about? I can imagine that you are wondering, which kind of companies are there? And I chose the ones that we as VRT took to conquer our challenges as a media company. So for example, it's Tinkerlist is a solution, a B2B solution, a newsroom solution where they built a solution. It's what Sarah also talked in the beginning, to go live as a news presenter. You just prepare it in an editor and you can go live by yourself. The only thing you have to do is press play and everything starts automatically. The second one is Web64. Web64 is a solution to fight against disinformation. So they screen the web and they dive deep in the source of the article. And that's how we see, the journalist sees, if possible misinformation is there. And then it's for her or his choice to write about it or debunk it as he decides. Another one is Limecraft. I think that most of you working in the media space know that we publish an extremely amount of online video. We have to subtitle it, and we do it with Limecraft. It's a Belgian startup. So that's how we solve the problem of live subtitling. The last one, what is it? Sorry. I don't know why the name isn't there. But what we do there is we screen live programs and we get direct feedback of the users. So that's how we learn in which scenario is working, where we have to adapt the scenario, where things are told too emotionally, where we have to make it a little bit more suspensive. That's what we learned there. And then the last two, Druid Learning is a content management platform that we are testing right now. And then the last is BotTalk. BotTalk is a German company, German startup, where we build synthetic voices. So as you know, for example, in podcast more and more, we don't let everything speak, but we use these synthetic voices, and we also have the goal to build really new synthetic voices. So not a clone of a voice that we already have in our company, but really new voices, building them from scratch. So BotTalk is the name of the startup. Who would like to know it? Okay, to wrap up, what is the reason why these startups choose for Stadium? It's because, and I only pick two, because for them, we accelerate their sales opportunities, we bring them towards new media companies. And of course, the idea is that they sell the product to them. The second thing that I will pick out is faster development cycle. So the reason that they are here is in the Stadium program is just to make their product better, quicker, faster, and then, of course, grow in that way. The reason why corporates, media corporates, choose for the Stadium program is actually because we have a really fine defined framework and a known methodology to bring these new technologies in these media corporates. And they say, for example, the co-creation and the pace of the program is really fast, and also the impact on the company workflows is quite good. So that's why they choose for Stadium. Lastly, I want to invite you, if you are a startup and you just want to understand better the program, what we deliver in the 12 months, if you have a media solution, a startup, and you want to grow your business in Europe, feel free to reach out. There is a QR code. You can find all the other startups on stadium.eu. So there you can find the list of all the Stadium solutions. So also as a media company, it can be interesting for you to have a look there. If you're an investor and you want to build together with us the next phase of Stadium, because we really want to build this further out, feel free also to reach out to me. Thanks. I have here also some flyers, so if somebody just immediately want to look into the list of startups, you can have a flyer here as well. And now I really want to introduce you to one of our most talented startups of Europe. Actually, they are building a book streaming platform for kids. So give a round of applause for Lesido.
Thank you, Peter. I'm also Peter, so giving it some. Glad to know we're one of the most successful startups in Europe. Very happy to know that. I'm Peter. I'm one of the founders of Lesido, and we are revolutionizing entertainment for kids, and we're doing so using books. Books, because reading enjoyment is actually the number one, the single best indicator of a child's future success. So that's really important. We're doing so because kids' media consumption is broken. Kids on average today watch over 3 hours of TV or YouTube Kids a day. Obviously, it's not all bad, but it's just too much of it. It's hurting their mental development. It's hindering the creativity. And most parents would much rather have their kids read books. So we built Lesido, which is an entertainment platform for children that is based on books. But obviously we want to do a little more. So we want it to be as entertaining as video, because kids fucking love that. We want it to be as wholesome as books, because it's good for kids. We want it to be as interactive as games. And we want it to be data-driven like Netflix. What does that mean? Obviously, as a streaming platform, it looks a lot like Netflix. So you can have access to hundreds of books of European and international publishers, which are on our website. And you can just read those on your tablet, on your iPad, on the computer. But also, we want to connect families to each other. So what we did is we integrated a video chat functionality within Lesido. So for example, grandparents who live a bit further away can read books to their grandchildren over the distance. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. We also have some pre-recorded books, so kids can listen, can have the books read to them, even if the parents or grandparents don't have time to read the books to these kids. And we will have interactive stories and interactive elements within these books to just leverage all the digital tools that we can use to make books a bit more interesting for kids. So rather than telling you, I'll just show you what that looks like actually. So you have your contacts within Lesido, and you can call them. That'll open up a video chat like we all know, well, you're all used to. And then the screen, the library, scrolling through it, picking a book, everything is synchronized on both sides. So both parties see the same thing at all times. You can open the book, turn the page, you can point at elements in the books. And this creates a really, really engaging interaction between the kids and the grandparents or the parents, which is a wonderful experience for both. Our business model is obviously all based on a B2C subscription model, just like Netflix. But what we can do is we have access to primary user data. So we really understand very well what our users are reading, why they're reading it. So we also offer data insights to publishers, which at the moment, if you look at kids book publishers, they don't have access to user data. All they know is like which books are bought in which city, but not who buys them, at what time are they read, what bundles are they bought. So all these things we can use to give publishers better insights so they can create better books. We're also working on original content. And we've heard this morning why that is relevant. I mean, kids content is systematically underestimated. There are companies with billions of dollars of turnover every year creating kids content. And we're going to do that with Lesido, hopefully someday. We are essentially copying the Netflix model. Netflix has proven that if you have access to user data, you can create more successful content. I mean, they're churning out one success after the other, and they're doing so with a better understanding of what users want to watch and see. Now, our hypothesis is that books are actually a much, much better medium than video in order to do so, because a video gives you a binary data point, right? You know, was the video watched? Yes or no. A book has 30 pages, and we can say how much time is spent on each page, and we have an interactive feature, so you can point at stuff in the book. We can say actually the red elephant on page 25, that's what's hooking users, right? We get much, much more detailed insights into what users want and what makes them engage with the content. We've come pretty far. We started like a year and a half ago. We have 25,000 registrations at the moment. Users read about 3 books a week on average. We've had over 200,000, actually that's an outdated number, it's much more than at the moment. Over 200,000 books read on Lesido at the moment, and 97% of users prefer Lesido over YouTube Kids, which, thank God, proves our first hypothesis. We did start in the German market, so we're available in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And as of the war in Ukraine, there had been a lot of Ukrainian refugee families coming to Germany. Obviously, they brought their kids, but they did not bring a bunch of kids' books. If you're fleeing a war zone, you pack light, as it turns out. So what we did is we translated a whole bunch of our books into Ukrainian, and in the course of that, we introduced a multilingual functionality to our app. So we're available in German and Ukrainian, and we would be very fast to scale into other languages as well. So if you're curious about Lesido from a different country, please do reach out. I'll be around for a little bit. If you have any questions, I think we do have some time left. So if there are any questions, shoot. If not, meet me after. Well, technically, there's English at the moment as well, but we have very few books at the moment.
Do you also work together with libraries to get into also more households that cannot afford?
Yeah, not yet. We do have a cooperation with a German NGO, which is called Mentor-Leseverband. It's an association of volunteers, mainly retirees, who read to children who don't have access to that many books. And they started using Lesido rather than going to school and reading to these children in person. They're using Lesido to do it over the distance virtually. Yes, I'm being told to stop, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter. And if you have any extra questions, he's over here. Last startup of today is SUMM AI, and I know it's will say Marie on the screen, but it's actually Vanessa who will be presenting today. Where is she? There she is. Come on.
Hi, yes. So yeah, you can see Flora, my co-founder, on the screen, but it's actually me, so hi. I'm Vanessa. I'm also a co-founder of SUMM AI. And what we're doing is we're building the Google Translate for plain language. First of all, who is this we? We are often introduced as the AI rock stars from the Technical University of Munich, and that's exactly who we are. We're a strong founding team with the passion to use our technological knowledge for a good cause. We're actually supported by 9 more people right now, and they help us in all different areas. So from design over language up to programming. We have this mission to make the world understandable. And this mission is actually a very personal one, since it comes from the close family circle of my co-founder, Flora. Flora's aunt has a slight physical disability and hence couldn't go to school as long or intense as she maybe nowadays could. But she's super interested in reading, maybe mostly about politics, but especially when it comes to longer sentences or complex words. She has a lot of questions and she mixes things up. That's not only Flora's aunt, but in the US, 54% of adults have a literacy of 6th grade level or below. It's very similar in Germany or Europe. So in Germany, more than 10 million people need so-called easy language or plain language to navigate their daily lives. This is, for example, people who have learning difficulties, people who have English or German or French as their second language, elderly people, or also educationally disadvantaged people. I have an example here where we can probably all relate. It's the COVID-19 rules. So those were very complex things happening and a lot of things that maybe got misunderstood. And if you are very lucky, as in this case, you can get the same information in short sentences, only one thing happening in each sentence, in a more active way and easier vocabulary. This is understandable for everyone. It's actually legally required, but it's very rare. So I guess a lot of you are thinking, plain language? I've never actually heard of this or seen this anywhere. And there's a reason why this is going on right now. It's very expensive, since this simplification is done completely manually. So there's translators sitting there. It takes them about 2 hours to translate a page. It costs about 150 euros per page. And it goes up to like 3 months of a waiting period to have your flyer or information simplified. And this is exactly where we come in with our Google Translate for plain language. So you simply input a complex text on the left, you click on Translate, and you get a simplified version of this text on the right in just a few seconds. You probably can't read it from the back, but what you can see on the left is it's long sentences. There's a lot of things happening there. It's very passive. And on the right, you can see that it's actually quite simple, and that's the beauty of plain language. Who are we targeting right now? So our first target group is the public sector, since there is a legal requirement to offer information in plain language. It's a very transparent and understandable process, so we can help all of the people who need this information. And a second step are private companies. There's a growing awareness for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also creating understandable content is very valuable. It gives you a greater audience to reach, and it also saves you costs. So for example, if you're an insurance or a bank and you send out informations via letters or emails, I guess you can all relate that sometimes I'm reading those things, I'm like, what's going on? Do I need to do anything? What do I need to do? So saving cost on phone calls of people not knowing what to do or maybe doing something wrong is also a very, very important dimension. Why is media an important part of this, both from like the public side and the private side? Really having inclusion and people being able to be part of society also means that they are up to date with what's going on, right? So the media can, with this, first of all, unlock new audiences, which is always a very important point. As I said, it's 54% of American adults that have a reading ability of 6th grade or less. So those are more than half of the adult population that maybe don't buy a newspaper because they don't really know what's going on in there. And also supporting this real inclusion, right? So supporting informed public discourse and opinion making. What are we, or where are we on our mission to make the word understandable? So we're a German-based startup. So in Germany, we're working with a lot of cities with the public sector to bring information into a plain and understandable way. As I said in the beginning, we're 13 team members. We're 14 team members as of next month. And we have 92 active users. We actually just finished our first trial phase for English, French, and Dutch. So if anyone is interested in this, please contact me or find me later here. I'll be more than happy to discuss. Yes, so as a last thought, join us in our mission to make the world understandable. And I'm very happy to hear all of your thoughts later and get into discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Oh, yeah. So we've been going on from 10 a.m. So I propose we take a short break for everyone to take some coffee, tea. There are some small snacks to eat as well. That means that we will start in 10 minutes at 12:30 with our final panel. So stay around and use the time to go to the restaurant or to have a drink, and then see you back in little less than 10 minutes. Okay, so good. Here we go. Happy to announce our last panel, or at least Anssi Kolumainen, which is our moderator of today. Anssi is a project director at the Finnish Sitra, where he is building a data ecosystem based on European values. So, Anssi, I will let you introduce your wonderful panel, and here you go.
So, good afternoon, everybody. In this session, we are going to be looking at who controls our online experience. As we know, we are living in a world where most of our online things are done in an environment that's controlled by few companies. And in this session, we will start with some data privacy aspects of the conversation, and then we'll have a look at some alternative models for digital platforms. And to talk about these visions on future of data and platforms, we have here today Eleni Sharp, Head of Product at the BBC Research and Development. She runs an innovation product team and has recently launched one of the first audience-facing services to be powered by a personal data store. Then we have Ethan Zuckerman, who is an associate professor of public policy, communication and information at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He's also led the MIT Center for Civic Media and is considered as the inventor of the pop-up ad. And then we have Osmar Olivo, or Oz, as he calls himself, the Vice President of Product Management at Inrupt. And previous to this, he has worked in the forefront of distributed databases and developer tooling. And then we are missing Brittany Kaiser, who is the co-founder of Own Your Own Data Foundation. Brittany is on her way. She has had a talk in another venue, and she's kind of like walking slowly. So we hope that she will hop on stage as soon as she arrives. She's the former VP at Cambridge Analytica and a writer and advocate of data privacy and digital rights. But we figured that we would start with Tim Berners-Lee, who's best known as the inventor of World Wide Web. And lately, Tim Berners-Lee has been involved with a data sharing protocol called Solid. And Inrupt, which Oz represents, is a company that aims at delivering Tim Berners-Lee's original vision of a web of shared benefits for everyone. Now, Oz, can you explain to us what does that mean?
Sure, I'll do my best. So Solid ultimately is a web standard. That's the easiest way to explain it. So the same way that HTTP is the web standard that we all use, and you could use Chrome, you could use Firefox. There's all these browsers. They all adhere to the same standard. So at the end of the day, you all have very similar experiences. So one of the things that wasn't factored in when the web first came to be was identity or data. So there is no identity on the web, which means every time you make an account somewhere, you've got to make an account somewhere and set up a username, password, and things associated with it. And then that's all tied to some database where all the data about you as a consumer or individual or patient is recorded. So what Solid is trying to do is add a web standard for data management and identity management. So this lets you do really cool things like what GDPR, CCPA, and other legislation out there is advocating for, like have your data be 100% portable, be able to share data across different providers and different platforms, and be able to consent to which organizations have access to your data and for what purposes and for what reasons. And all of this is built as part of a protocol standard. And now Inrupt, what we're doing, we kind of see ourselves as the Red Hat of Solid. So what we're really trying to do is build an enterprise-grade platform for people to be able to deploy this new standard in practice, as opposed to just sort of a theoretical or academic project. So we're doing projects all over the globe with across various sectors, whether that's the medical sector, media sector, financial services, retail, all sorts of sectors where data is involved, essentially. And yeah, that's really the gist of it.
So if I, as a user, would like to start not working, but using Solid to control or use Solid as my data wallet, I know it's not a wallet, you call it a pod. What would that in practice mean?
So what that means essentially is that you have a degree of visibility. One of the words I really avoid when talking about this, but I'll address the elephant in the room, is control. Because I think control means something different to everybody. So I avoid that word. It's more about agency and visibility. So, if I had full control over my bank account, I would add a couple zeros to the balance, right? So, but if my bank balance is being shared with other banks, maybe for processing a loan or to see if I'm creditworthy, I want to see that that's happening and say, yes, I consent to that, that's okay, or no, I don't. And this is true across all verticals. If Netflix is sharing my viewing data with Hulu, I'd want to know and say, oh yeah, I'd actually like some good recommendations from Hulu. Or say, oh no, I want those two accounts to be completely separate. Please don't do that. So it's really more about giving users agency and visibility over who has your data, what are they doing with it, what third parties is it being shared with, and do you consent to that?
So Eleni, the BBC has experimented or done stuff with solids or solid pods. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experiments and what did you learn?
Yeah, of course, yes. So we've been working with Solid for a few years now. So at the BBC, we're interested in this space because we really want to imagine what might a world be like where everybody actually has their own personal data. Your personal data is in your control. It's not being sold. You know what's happening with it. So we've been thinking, what does that world look like for the BBC, for our audiences? We've been working with lots of partners on that as well. So we've created a whole bunch of kind of prototypes, so like UX patterns, technical prototypes. And last year, about October, we launched the first kind of audience experience of that. So it's called BBC Together. And it's a watch party, so you can watch a show with your friends, you can pause it, you can get recommendations, and all the while your data is totally safe. Your data just stays there in your pod. It's powered by a Solid data pod. And that's kind of a real first of its kind. It's just a small step, but it's a real first step to kind of getting audiences just thinking a little bit more about your data, because we really encourage them, once they've had the experience of watching the watch party, we encourage them to go and see their data so they can see, what data has been captured during this experience. And then you can edit it, you can delete it, or you can just save it to your pod as well. So I made a list of a few things that we've learned that I thought might be interesting to share. So one was the people, when you speak to audiences, people use the phrase, I'm in too deep a lot of the time. So people, they feel like it's out of control. They want more control of their data, but actually in reality, what does that actually mean? You know, everybody's really, really busy. We haven't then got time to be, we don't want all the admin overheads of managing our personal data as well. So we've got to, they want more privacy and they want more control, but they don't want the increased complexity as well. So that's just kind of something for us to bear in mind. Another thing that we found was that people are finding workarounds, like manual workarounds to kind of getting themselves more privacy. So you hear a lot about people that are creating multiple personas online. And people also are selecting devices now for their families and their children that they perceive to be safer and give them greater levels of privacy. And then the final one is just that we're kind of still a way off, I think, finding new business models for this data economy. So, for example, what happens if audiences don't share their data back to the BBC? You have to, like, you know, the value, we were talking earlier, you know, the value exchange of that data has got to be different. And, you know, that's another big, huge consideration, you know, and that might then change, you know, how, you know, what's that value exchange within organisations? So that's got to be thought about as well. But, I mean, it's super exciting, you know, it's like really such a privileged position to be something, you know, at the beginning of something new. So we've been kind of working with really good people and starting with small projects, and you can start to see, even in the last kind of year or two, that change is really, really happening.
So if I had been living in the UK at the time when we were running the experiment, or is it still running?
It's still running,
okay.
and it's...
And what would have, you know, what would it enabled me to do?
Well, you could go on and you could say, Eleni, do you want to have a watch party together? So we could schedule a time, we'd say, right, let's watch a piece of content together at, say, 7 o'clock tonight. So the content would sync on both of our laptops or iPads. We could watch it together, we could pause it, we could rewind it, we could chat while we're doing that, we could get a shared recommendation based on what we've watched before. But at the end of that experience, rather than all that data going to an organisation or back to the BBC, that data would just stay on your pod and you could decide what you want to do with it. So nobody need know we'd had a party.
And then I read about another experiment that you ran where you were kind of aggregating data from Netflix and Spotify
Yes,
and the BBC iPlayer into a single source, and then I, as a user, could kind of like use that data to maybe hand it to the BBC, or maybe hand it to Netflix to get better recommendations.
Totally, yeah.
Did you get any kind of feedback from Netflix or Spotify with regards to how happy were they with the arrangement?
We didn't actually know, but that was, the insight from that was kind of that everybody's behaviour is different on different services and platforms. So we thought, you know, well, what if the BBC knew what I listened to on Spotify? You know, that would make your recommendations in the BBC so much richer and valuable. So the idea being that, you know, in the future, maybe you could pull in all your media services into one place, into your pod, and then you could take those recommendations across all the different services.
And so BBC is a public service broadcaster, and I'm looking at the room, I'm assuming that most people know what it is, but the European model is a little bit different than the public service media here. Ethan, you've been talking about social media that could operate as likewise as a public service broadcaster. What would that mean in practice?
Sure. Well, am I on? Yeah. Great. Terrific. So social media has become an absolutely enormous part of the public sphere. Broadcasters are providing high-quality news, commentary, so on and so forth. But we all now have this additional layer, which is where are we having conversations about our political lives, our civic ambitions, so on and so forth. For the vast majority of us, those conversations are happening on platforms that we don't own, we don't control, and that was my suspicion, was that I was not on. That we don't own, don't control, and that are surveilling our behavior at all times. So, you know, obviously Facebook has been collecting massive amounts of data, using it to target advertising. I think with Twitter's takeover by Elon Musk, it's become quite apparent that this isn't just a matter of corporate control, it can be a matter of ideological control, it can be a matter of bias sort of associated with that. The ability to have a space where we can have conversations about public matters is really important. And I think in the long run, we actually need a space that's much more analogous to public media to have conversations like the ones that we have on Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. You mentioned that public media works very differently in the United States than it does in Europe. Here's one key difference. We didn't have public media in the United States until the 1970s. We didn't get NPR or PBS until about 1970, and we got it because of market failure. we got to the point in our television system where we were only getting commercial broadcasting that wasn't particularly good for the people watching it, particularly for children. And at that point, we ended up with the government saying, maybe we should put some money into creating an alternative space. It's entirely different from the BBC, which started creating radio content, as early as the 19-teens. So we actually have a precedent of coming into situations of market failure and saying, this is not serving us very well, maybe we should build something different.
So now one of the things that you'll be writing about is called Fediverse. And about a week ago, a co-founder of Twitter released a new service called Blue Sky, and it's supposed to be somewhat similar to Mastodon, which is another service. And all of these services are Twitter-like services, in my opinion, but what they aim to do is they aim to be interoperable, meaning that if you are using one of these services, you can chat with or exchange information with a user of another service. How would Fediverse change our media experience, in your opinion?
Sure. So probably the best way to talk about the Fediverse is a service called Mastodon that I'm guessing a lot of people in this room have heard about. Mastodon tries to work much like Twitter does. It allows you to send short messages and have them received by an audience of people who subscribe to them. The key difference is that instead of having a single server controlled by Elon Musk, you've got hundreds or thousands of servers, each of which can have their own slightly different rules associated with them. Those servers can choose to peer with one another. They can choose to transfer messages from one another. They can also choose not to peer, right? They can decide to defederate. So you may be able to replicate that sort of big room experience that people have had with Twitter, this idea of being able to reach hundreds of millions of people. But you also may not, and it will really have to do with who's running your server. Personally, I think that's a dumb architecture. So the way that we're trying to build this over in my lab is around a client-server architecture. So we are trying to give people a client that runs on their phone, runs on their desktop, runs on their laptop, and it speaks to existing social media services like Twitter, like Mastodon. It can speak to new small social media platforms that speak ActivityPub, which is the protocol behind it. It certainly could speak Solid once we get to the point where Solid is something that's out there. And we're hoping to make it backward compatible with existing social media networks like Facebook. The trick is if we do it with Facebook right now, Facebook will sue us. And that's a bit awkward. But the goal is to engage in what people call adversarial interoperability. We want to be usable by everybody who's putting social networks out there. The reason we think people will use this over time is it does give them vastly more control over what they do. In Facebook, I have no control over how those messages are coming to me. Facebook makes all sorts of judgments about who I want to hear from, who I don't want to hear from. And I transmit an enormous amount of behavioral data back to Facebook, which Facebook then uses to market to me and can also sell to third parties. I'm not okay with either of those things. I believe we should be doing this in a way where you can control where your data is going, which is very much what Solid's about, but also where you can make choices about what social media you're seeing and how you want it to be filtered. So this architecture that we're building around a product called Gobo, which is going to be released later this spring, lets you choose what algorithms you want to use to search and sort your social media rather than outsourcing it to Facebook or anybody else.
Thanks. So, welcome, Brittany. We kind of briefly introduced you already. We were talking about first about privacy and Solid, and now we got into social media acting similar way to public service media and interoperability. And now I guess we're hopping a little bit backwards towards privacy. So what do you think are the new media business models and the opportunities that emerging technology related to privacy and increased control over people's data what kind of new business models would that enable, and what are the key legislative pieces involved to that?
Absolutely. So, hi everyone. Brittany Kaiser. Such a pleasure to be here. So, for me, I have been a long-term advocate of a concept called data ownership. And now, to some people, that might mean privacy, because if you own your data, you decide to keep it all to yourself. But it can also mean a few other business models in the social media and in general, the way that people interact with technology, which means that if you own all of your data like you do your other properties or intangible properties, that you would then be able to anonymize that or pseudonymize that and share that data for purposes to which you explicitly consented and agreed while understanding what you were agreeing to, while knowing where it's going to go, and you're happy for it to be used for those purposes, and you can incrementally earn off of the back of that. Now, this is what a lot of social media companies are afraid of, because they think they're splitting their profits with their users, which is completely untrue. If they would think about the way that data science actually works, is that data science becomes more accurate when you have more data most of the time. If it's organized, consensual data where you can tell that it is real. And therefore, you would be able to actually create more productization. You would be able to create a better user experience that was consensual, and therefore people were excited about the user experience that they were having. I just came off the stage with Professor Joan Donovan from Harvard, who just released her book, Meme Wars, and we were talking about meme warfare and the way that if you are actually controlling what you see, that you might even spend more time on social media because it either doesn't incite you, it doesn't turn you off, you're not a young person that is being targeted with suicide websites, et cetera, and so forth. So if you were able to curate and say, hey, here are the elements of my data that I would like to use to curate my user experience, and here are the elements of my data where if they're not connected to my personally identifiable information, I'm happy to share, like my shopping activity, what are some of my favorite brands, colors, foods that I order off the grocery store, things like that, that you're happy to be monetized, and you can then share in that profit, which right now it's possible for people to earn many dollars a day at minimum doing that, which might not mean a lot to us in the room, but to billions of people around the world that live on less than $2 a day, that is completely life-changing. So for social media to become more benevolent means more transparency, more permission structures, more tracking and traceability, and the ability for us to monetize the assets that we are creating, not just for the platform, which right now we are giving all of our time and attention, all of that value is just going to the value of the platforms that we're using and not being retained for ourselves. So I really see that as a huge future. That's the entire point of the Web3 movement, where we own the data and the audiences and the value that we are creating and are therefore able to share in that digital economy, unlike most of the business models that exist today.
So you talked about selling data, so monetizing your own data. Oz, do you agree that that's kind of like the best value proposition that we have for people who in future will own their data?
I mean, I think that's, it's, and Eleni mentioned it earlier, it's really about the value exchange, and monetization is one form of value exchange. The example I was using earlier about, like, you know, getting better recommendations on Hulu. I might be willing to exchange my data just for that because I'm getting something out of it. So are people just going to say, yes, I will, you know, share my data with these third parties or these organizations for no reason? Absolutely not. But this actually creates a more fair landscape that is way more about what's the value I'm providing, what's the service I'm providing in exchange for this data, which really starts to level out the landscape in terms of innovation, in terms of competition, and yeah, in terms of monetization, if that be, you know, the course an individual wants to go in with their data.
I'd like to add one more thing to that, which is that there is a lot of opportunity outside of just thinking of this value exchange as a dollar amount. Say you don't need a couple of dollars a day, that's totally fine. You might instead get tokens or value within the platform that then you could use for yourself. So if I decided to spend a certain amount of time on Twitter or Facebook, then I would earn that value in the platform, and then maybe I could do advertising for my nonprofit so that some of my teachings, my lectures, my workshops actually get to more families and students. That is another value exchange where there's no money that's going to me. It's just I'm getting free use of services within a platform because I have provided value. So there's many other ways to think about it. It's just the large-scale global change that can actually come from this that I see is that we can actually empower people with just a phone to earn enough to at least take care of their basic human rights, which is food and clean water. We can do that with social media, and we've seen that some of the biggest social media companies are not designed to be benevolent, but we do have the power to change that.
But Brittany, generally speaking, the sorts of people who would really benefit from $1 or $2 a day are not worth a whole lot to advertisers. They're generally turning over much, much lower advertising rates. I mean, you're positing a model with numbers basically for people in the developed world, but now you're suggesting that the benefits are in the developing world. How do you resolve those two?
Because data of people that don't have a lot of data on them is actually a lot more valuable. Yes. So I worked in advertising campaigns in over 50 different countries with big conglomerates, some of the biggest companies in the world. It was part of my job at Cambridge Analytica. And for example, there was one campaign we're looking at in Mexico. So people where the only data that exists on them is that they go to their local store and they buy, snacks, maybe a Coca-Cola, et cetera, and so forth, just locally. And so their local store is the only way that data actually exists from these people. So that data is incredibly valuable because it's literally the only data that is recorded on populations that are tens of millions of people in some cases. And so specific strategy is to be able to get more information about behavioral data of those individuals where if they were to decide to have an app on even a very basic phone and they decided to opt into sharing data, that data is now incredibly valuable because the only way that the government can communicate to these people or that companies that would like to sell products to these people can communicate is by having that incremental data collection. And so those of us that are using tons of devices have been creating billions of data points for their entire lives. That little bit of data collection is not so important because there's enough already out there about us. But being able to create targeted data sets about people that don't have very much data on them is incredibly valuable to certain companies and to governments, of course. Yeah.
Now, early on in South by Southwest, there was a conversation about data, at least in the schedule I went in, and I was surprised that it was actually about abortion in Texas. And the worry was that currently, kind of like the one that you were describing, there are, if you go and buy a pregnancy test from a shop, there's a mark, and you pay with a credit card, there's a mark there, and there's a trace. And companies were kind of trusted or sort of encouraged to be really responsible with what the data is that they gather from their clients, so that they don't put their clients at risk. So they were really seeing that it's the corporate America that needs to protect their customers from the governments or the states in this case. And that's a really, really interesting way of thinking for a European where we have really much trust in our kind of institutions and everything. And then in here it was more like, well, putting your data into the hands of a corporate America is like putting money into a bank. And now we know that putting money into a bank is not a simple thing here either. So if I'm an individual with a data pod or something, and I'm supposed to be understanding, who can I trust with my data in this world? How do I go about it? Who can you trust in this world with your data if you're in control?
That was a really big thing that we found. A lot of people were, who do you give your data to? And people were really nervous as well about, what if I've got this data pod with all my data on in one place? Does that make me really vulnerable? And there's a big, that's what everybody kept saying, they felt that there was really big security risks around doing that. And I'm sure, like with solid technology is all totally encrypted, so it's just a perceived risk. But yeah, big perceived risks around that, and also who do people trust with their data? It definitely wasn't big tech, probably not the government. When we spoke to them, could it be the BBC? It was a maybe, but is that the right thing for the BBC to be doing? So I think that's definitely a big question that needs resolving.
Data brokering at the moment is about a $200 billion business. There's about 4,000 companies involved with it. It's extremely poorly regulated, and it's incredibly dangerous. There was an app in wide use in the United States at about 33 million users called Life 360. It was advertised to people as a great way of keeping track of where your kids are. It then sold that location information to whoever wanted to use it so that they could target your children. And you know, that went on for several years until it was exposed by the markup, which managed to talk to people who are working for that company. The US right now is freaking out about TikTok because there's fear that somehow TikTok is going to use location-based data to monitor politicians, journalists, and in fact, they have. The irony of all of this is that that is simply how business works in this country. And those industries exist, they are largely unregulated, and that is the default for this. I'm pretty skeptical that the way out of this is to create a bigger market for private data. I suspect that the way out of this is to give people vastly more control over their data, whether it's through a model like Solid or through some of the models that I'm talking about, where you build critical services like social networks, where they are supported by government funding, community funding, subscription funding, none of which require surveillance economy to prop up services, which honestly, in some cases, we should be paying for in the same way that we decide to pay for things like public media.
So you guys work in this space at the moment, and I can sort of anticipate that you'll be working in this space for the next 5 years. What would you like to see happen with regards to data privacy and sort of control over people's data and the possibility of monetizing one's data in different continents and in US in special during the next 5 years? How about you, for example? Brittany?
Yeah. So what I have started to see in many countries around the world, and I've been involved in a lot of the legislative drafting and lobbying around many digital asset definitions where your data becomes your intangible personal property. That's the first definition that we got here in the state of Wyoming in 2018, which has therefore then been based off of you now have property rights protections over your data, which is the strongest legislative infrastructure that we have anywhere in the world. And I'm a human rights lawyer, so I would love to use the human rights framework in order to protect ourselves legally in the digital space. It has shown that that is not as effective as the property rights legal framework. So when someone damages your property, you have legal recourse and you are very likely to win as long as you have evidence that your property has been damaged. So for instance, after we passed that law in the state of Wyoming, I became the first person to successfully sue Equifax for the data breach because we sued them for property damage in the state of Minnesota and won at the Supreme Court. So your data is now also your property in the state of Minnesota, for example, and our case law has now been used in many cases around the world since then. So if you are the producer of the world's most valuable asset class, digital assets, data, then you should have the rights to the value of the property that you are creating. So those digital assets as property gives you that control, it gives you that legal recourse to protect yourself, and it also makes you a part of the digital economy where you have plenty of rights when allowing your assets to be used by a platform. And if your assets are to be borrowed or transferred or licensed by another platform besides the one that you're using, you would have to engage in a very specific contractual agreement. And I don't mean 40, 50, 60 pages of terms and conditions that you're never going to read that are written in legalese, but I mean something that is in 1st to 3rd grade reading level where you can toggle on and off your yes and no's, where you are completely consensually agreeing to what is going on, or you can say no to everything and your data doesn't go anywhere else. But triggering those property rights, which is something that is starting to happen in the United States and in many other jurisdictions around the world, I think is one of the most innovative ways to do this and one of the most successful ways thus far. And we've seen in the update to CCPA and CPRA, which Alistair McTaggart put into the law, you now have to, if a company is monetizing your data, then you have the right to ask what they are monetizing, who it's being monetized by, and where it's going, and what is the dollar value on that. And then further, demanding rights to that dollar value is kind of the next legislative step, and a lot of Web3 technologies are specifically enabling that.
What about us?
Yeah, so actually a lot of the things Brittany covered, but probably the main one for me is consent. I think right now that's the core thing that's missing from all our relationships with every single organization and entity out there. It's this concept of, hey, you are providing me with a service. I am giving you access to certain things about me in order to receive that service, and here are the terms. Again, not a big 300-page, end-user license agreement, but more like a cell phone. And I use this analogy a lot, actually. I can go in my iPhone or my Android and go to my permissions tab and say, oh, these apps have access to my GPS data. These apps have access to my microphone. Why can't I do that with my medical data, or my viewing history, or my financial data? And that's really sort of like the core mission behind Solid, is to add a consent layer on top of all of your data interactions to help build more of a direct relationship between you and an organization. And now suddenly, it's not like, oh, I didn't realize this organization was sharing my data with 50 third-party partners of theirs. Our whole goal is to get rid of the concept of third parties. It now becomes your phone buzzes, hey, this doctor's office wants access to your medical records. Okay, cool. Oh, I got some blood work done. Hey, this lab is requesting access to your blood work to go do some processing. Is that cool? Yes or no? So really creating that cell phone-like experience, but for all the data about you on the web in a transparent, visible way. Like that to me is probably, if we can get there in the next 5 years, just where everything has consent with a nice end user facing dashboard, we'll have come a really long way.
Ethan, so what would you like to see happen in this space in the next 5 years?
So there are many things that you can deal with in a framework of property rights that societies decide not to deal with in a framework of property rights. Human organs, for instance, turn out to be things that we generally don't let people sell, even though there is a large and active market for these things. And you could argue that people's sensitive behavioral data is something similarly that you would decide as a society you're not going to allow people to sell, particularly when they're being put in situations where there are services that aren't being able to offer to them in any other fashion or way. So me personally, I'd really love to see us move away from a propertized model where we decide that everything is sellable to someone for the highest bidder. We know from years and years of experience that whether it's a simple opt-out or a complex opt-out, the vast majority of people don't. It was in all of the literature about these products that people were going to sell the location of your children. That was in there if you read through all of it. And a well-regulated society would decide that that's not a legitimate business model, and that having the ability to pay to target children who are out there in the world is not something that we want to do. So I would love to see us take this space as being less about the unfettered free market and more being about a necessary set of tools for democracy. If you're going to have a democracy, you need to have spaces where you can access information and talk about it to make decisions as a society. And right now, we've handed that over to some of the most powerful and rapacious companies that we've ever seen in the world. That would be a great thing to turn away from. We are having a meeting here around what Europe can bring to the table. Europe actually has stronger privacy traditions than the US, which is often quite ready to hand this over to the highest bidder. And I would love to see Europe have more of a voice in debates like this, rather than moving over to a propertized concept of this space.
So, Eleni, you're the one from Europe. What do you like to see happen in this space?
I would really love to see audiences becoming a little bit more active in this area and really kind of starting to just be more aware of it and starting to think, hang about, this isn't right, and starting to be more aware and talking about it, and then for there to be an option of viable alternative products on the market, which audiences then start using as well.
So if we combine all this together, what we want to do is we want to have societal discussion over what you can sell in terms of data,
Then you need to have a good system for consent in place. Then you need to be able to monetize the data that you can legally sell and get a share of the value. And then we should have institutions like the public service broadcasters kind of like bringing up the data literacy level in all societies. So I thank you all for coming over and listening to us, and I thank the panelists. It's been an interesting discussion, and I'll hope to continue it on the corridors in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.